desert scene with blazing sun, endless dunes, and those magical little oases. You probably picture the legendary Sahara, right? But what if I tell you that 11,000 years ago, this vast expanse of hot sand looked totally different than it does today? Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't around then. But I'm told that back then, what we now call a desert was a lush paradise, brimming with lakes, rivers, grassy plains, and even woodsy forests. So, where did all this water go? There are many stories about the distant past of our planet when deserts were covered with jungles and forests. And then something happened, like changing climates or colossal earthquakes, and it all turned green lands into dunes. But how about a theory that Sahara became a desert because of humans and goats? The Sahara has seen its fair share of wet and dry drama throughout the ages, mostly thanks to little shifts in Earth's orbital tilt, causing variations in how much solar radiation hits the atmosphere. There were even times called the African humid periods, when the rain would pour in and transform the dry landscape into a bright green haven. But between 8,000 and 4,500 years ago, something really funky happened to this region. Certain areas went from humid to dry, way too fast to explain it by just orbital changes. In the blink of an eye, the lush Sahara turned into the Sahara we know today. Now, if you ask scientists why it happened, they will tell you, oh, it's just poor parameterization of the data. Bet you didn't get it, did you?
What?
Well, right, let me translate it from scientific to common human. It means they really don't know the answer themselves, and they got a bunch of missing puzzle pieces. But as scientists sifted through ancient dirt and pollen samples, they spotted a quirky trend. Wherever there were pastoralists, also known as humans with their domesticated animals, the plant life seemed to shift. It was as if every time humans and their furry friends meandered through the greenery, they turned it into scrub and desert right behind them. Oops. Yep, chances are that by overgrazing, humans were sapping moisture out of the atmosphere, since plants give off moisture, which helps make clouds and making things even sunnier, leading to a quicker end of the humid vibes. Plus, our ancestors may have been getting a little too cozy with fire for land management, further speeding up the desert takeover. Anyway, scientists are sure that this lush Sahara would have turned back into desert eventually, even if humans hadn't shown up, thanks to Earth's natural rhythms. So there's no need to pin this abrupt change solely on humans. It could simply be about nature getting feedback from vegetation and dust cycles. It's difficult to determine what caused these changes, as it's all interconnected. During the last humid period, the Sahara was filled with hunter-gatherers. As things got a little drier, they started herding animals for food. The weather pushed people to herd cattle. It's also possible that grazing sped up the landscape degradation. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or in this case, the human or the cow? It's tough to tell with the evidence we have now. Now today, it's safe to say that water is no longer that big of a problem in the Sahara, even though it's a huge desert and the times of lush forests there are long gone. But technology's got us covered. For example, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System, the biggest underground water stash on the planet. It's nestled beneath the Sahara Desert's eastern edge and stretches across 4 northeastern African countries – Sudan, Chad, Libya, and Egypt, covering a whopping 770,000 square miles and holding around 36,000 square miles of groundwater. Just look at the pipes transported when it was being built. It's the world's largest irrigation project. No wonder it's feasible to thrive in the Sahara today. But imagine thriving in the Sahara Desert with just one water source. Sounds like a tough gig, right? But the ancient Garamantes did just that, surviving and even thriving for nearly 1,000 years without monsoons or rivers flowing to their desert paradise. These clever folks were the trendsetters of urban life in the sands, and even the Romans couldn't help but notice their genius. While many thought they were just desert-dwelling savages, the Garamantes were busy building an empire in one of the toughest climates on Earth. But how did they do that? Well, they got crafty and dug a whole bunch of underground tunnels to tap into a massive sandstone aquifer. They were literally squeezing every drop of life from under the dunes. But recently, research showed that the Garamantes weren't just hardworking, they were pretty lucky too. The Garamantes had an underground aquifer that brought water up to a hill where they built over 500 fogaras, which are irrigation systems, some stretching as long as 2.5 miles. It was like sipping water through a straw, which let them irrigate their crops for nearly a century, especially since even a little rain would help recharge the system. But eventually, due to rain insufficiency, the aquifer ran low, and reaching it again would have meant digging more tunnels and relying on more people. That's a tough problem, considering these people were in the middle of food and water shortages. Guess I don't need to tell you what happened to the Garamantes, do I? The fall of the Garamentian culture might be linked to several factors. It may have been due to climate changes, or they may have simply used their water resources too much. Back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually fertile agricultural land, thanks in part to the cool irrigation system the Garamentians created. But since fossil water isn't something you can replenish over time, the groundwater levels dropped pretty low. This likely played a big role in the kingdom's decline by the late 7th century CE. That sounds like someone who hit a lottery jackpot, used up all the money, and went back to their original not-so-cool job once the bank account got fully drained. Oh, by the way, even if the Garamantes left some secret wisdom messages for us, the chances are we'll never get what they wanted to tell us. Nobody really knows what language they used, and their texts are nearly indecipherable to us today. But let's go back to the Green Sahara. So it transformed into a desert about 4,500 years ago. But today, we can understand how people lived in those times in the Sahara thanks to natural parks in Africa that have the ultimate outdoor art gallery. There are well over 15,000 ancient paintings and carvings depicting everyday life from around 11,000 years ago. However, if the carvings aren't enough for you and you feel like visiting an actual green desert, all you have to do is book a flight to California. One of the most beautiful phenomenon in the world, the superbloom, takes place here. Look at all these colors – orange, green, pink. It's a miracle. Wildflowers bloom right in the middle of a hot desert after several years of rainfall in dry places. It's such a bright and colorful landscape that superblooms can be seen from space. This rare phenomenon can be observed in other arid places and deserts in western and southern Africa, western Australia, and Chile. In all these places, the weather is very hot and dry in summer. Mild humid air comes in winter, and this is the ideal environment for mass flowering. Flower seeds that lie in desert sands can wait for decades before starting to produce flowers. When the hot sun destroys all the weeds and grass, and the rainfall becomes enough to moisten the soil, the seeds are kind of like, well, okay, now it's our turn to play a big game. And then hundreds of thousands of tourists come to take photos and post these beautiful pictures on social media. And this, unfortunately, is one of the main dangers for flowers. Therefore, if you find yourself in a place like this, don't pick the flowers and don't trample on them. Stay on the path, don't litter. Take only pictures and leave only footprints. You get it? Good. Well, there you are. The sun is scorching, you're thirsty. All you can think about is water and ancient bones under your feet. You're wandering through the Sahara, the largest hot desert on Earth. Right now, you're crossing a stretch of sand called Whale Valley. And all over these 75 square miles of land, fossils cover the ground so thickly that you can't help but step on them. Paleontologist Hesham Salam says it's an unusual picture in this place. The bones are poking right out of the cliffs, as if they're calling to you to come check them out. You can spot ribs scattered all over the place. Look at these vertebrae. They're giant. Ooh, the creature they once belonged to must have been up to 65 feet long. The fossils show that the animal had a streamlined body like today's whale, but still had features like hind legs and feet. For scientists, it means a very exciting thing. They might have discovered a fully intact skeleton of a prehistoric whale. It was an animal that lived in this area when Egypt was underwater. You see, today, the Valley of the Whales is the world's largest ancient whale graveyard. You're likely wondering what marine animals are doing in a desert more than 100 miles away from the nearest coast. Well, millions of years ago, this desert was at the bottom of a massive ocean called the Tethys, which stretched from Europe to India. When sea levels dropped, the ocean left behind a seabed covered with fossils. And today, the fossils of some of the earliest known whales rest here, which gives researchers a peek into how today's massive ocean whales may have evolved. The fossils here are super detailed, even with some stomach contents still intact. Uh-oh. Scientists have also found fossils of ancient sharks, crocodiles, and turtles, helping to recreate what this marine world looked like millions of years ago. Now, the first whale bones were discovered in 1902, but it wasn't until the 1980s that people really started to explore the area, only when access to this area became better. Sadly, some fossils had been taken away by collectors before the site turned into a protected area. Most of the fossils are just under the surface, slowly revealed by erosion. Whale Valley gives us an amazing glimpse into millions of years of ancient coastal marine life. But let's move further. Ancient whale fossils aren't the only discovery you're going to make today. For over 150 years, scientists have been puzzled by a strange creature that lived millions of years ago. But now, thanks to some amazing fossils found in Morocco, they've finally figured it out. Look at them. These creatures are called blah blah blah. Nah, I'm kidding. Styophorans. They look like flattened armor with a long arm sticking out. Researchers discovered these creatures in 2014 and were shocked. The fossils dated back around 478 million years. They found around 450 specimens, and to their surprise, some even had soft tissues preserved, which is super rare. Before this, they only knew Styophorans from their hard parts. Originally, scientists thought these creatures were good old echinoderms, animals like sea urchins and starfish. But new discoveries prove that they had a core body and feeding arm similar to modern starfish, complete with a water vascular system to help them move and eat. This finding ends a long debate about where Styophorans fit in the animal family tree. Now we know they're related to echinoderms, but are more advanced because they don't have the typical 5-ray symmetry. Ooh, come here and look at this giant fossil. It was found in the Sahara and gave scientists new insights into the Spinosaurus, the largest carnivorous dinosaur we know about. These 95 million-year-old remains also confirm that it was the first known swimming dinosaur. The Spinosaurus had flat paddle-like feet and nostrils on the top of its crocodile-like head, perfect for staying underwater. It was a pretty weird dinosaur with a long neck, trunk, tail, and a 7-foot sail on its back, so it must have spent a lot of time in the water. At over 50 feet long, Spinosaurus might have been even larger than T-Rex. The first Spinosaurus remains were discovered about 100 years ago in Egypt, but only this new fossil, found in Morocco, helped scientists reconstruct this dinosaur for the first time. Researchers paid attention to the creature's shorter hind limbs and wide claws. These features point to adaptations for life in the water. Its snout and dense bones also suggest it was a swimmer, while its spiked tail likely attracted mates. Hey, good looking, come here often? And here's another astonishing find made in Tunisia, the remains of Machimosaurus rex. Now, so far it's believed to be the biggest crocodile ever. This ancient croc was about 32 feet long and weighed around 66,000 pounds. It was a top predator around 130 million years ago, and its skull was over 5 feet long. Now, this discovery is a big deal because it shows that these crocs stuck around longer than we thought. Before this, scientists believed that they disappeared during a minor extinction event between the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Now, let's go back to the fact that the Sahara was once underwater, and some of the largest sea creatures ever lived there. A study published in the Bulletin of the American Museum of Natural History speaks about an ancient body of water called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. It existed between 150 million years ago, covering parts of Western Africa. Scientists spent 2 decades trying to recreate this prehistoric underwater world. They found it was warm and shallow, home to some pretty terrifying creatures, including 5-foot-long catfish and 40-foot-long sea snakes. Yikes! The seaway was cut off from larger oceans for long stretches, which may have helped these predators grow larger because resources were always available. It's a classic case of evolution at work, leading to what scientists call gigantism in isolated environments. But all that water didn't just disappear with no trace. Under the sands of the Sahara, scientists have discovered a massive ancient lake, which they're calling a megalake. Makes sense? This lake formed around 250,000 years ago when the Nile River flooded the eastern Sahara. At its biggest, this lake covered over 42,000 square miles. It's about half as big as Kansas. They also found evidence of a smaller lake, 93 miles west of the Nile, at a slightly lower level and covering 18,600 square miles. All of this adds to growing evidence that once, North Africa had many lakes that might have created migration routes, helping early humans move across the continent. Now, in the Sahara, you can find not only fossils of bizarre animals. In May 2020, some weird rocks with greenish crystals were discovered in a sandy region in southern Algeria's Sahara Desert. When scientists checked them out, they found out these rocks weren't from Earth. They were actually pieces of a meteorite called Erg-Chek 002. This meteorite is super old, like the oldest volcanic rock ever found. It melted ages ago in the fiery heart of an ancient protoplanet that no longer exists. Researchers had recently published a study in Nature Communications, revealing that they have analyzed lead and uranium isotopes in Erg-Chek 002 and found out it's more than 4.5 billion years old. Another cool discovery made in the Sahara is quite unexpected. A few years ago, scientists found what they think are the world's oldest colors, and they're bright pink. These pigments were uncovered from rocks that are around 1.1 billion years old in the Sahara Desert. The colors came from microscopic organisms, as animals didn't exist back then. The discovery was made by a PhD student who crushed the ancient rocks and analyzed the pigments. These pink pigments are actually ancient chlorophyll from photosynthetic organisms that lived in an ocean that's long gone. Researchers are now sure that this finding could help explain why larger, complex creatures showed up much later in Earth's history. Before these colors were discovered, scientists didn't know what was missing in the food chain that delayed the evolution of larger animals. Now they understand that tiny cyanobacteria were at the bottom of that chain. Apparently, this discovery is not just about finding some old pink stuff. Scientists believe it's a breakthrough in understanding the history of life on Earth. Now, if you were to check out the Sahara from space right now, instead of a barren wasteland, you'd spot a surprising sight. Dry land sprinkled with some lakes and rivers in Morocco and Algeria, all thanks to some heavy rains in early September 2024. These aren't oases. This is just the Sahara going back to the factory settings. Believe it or not, eons ago, one of the biggest deserts on Earth was actually a lush paradise full of greenery. Let's first see how the Sahara turned into a desert. During the last ice age, Earth was much colder, and big ice sheets covered a lot of the land. At that time, the Sahara Desert was significantly bigger than it is today, and on our planet there were fewer tropical forests. And the cooler temperatures changed how rain was distributed in the tropics. Now, normally, warm air rises in the tropics, which helps create rain. Since it was colder during the Ice Age, this system got, messed up, and less rain fell in some areas. This caused more dry and desert-like conditions in places that are usually wetter. There was also a lot of dust blowing around in the Sahara Desert, which scientists found in old ocean sediments. But about 12,500 years ago, something surprising happened. The dust levels went way down. This meant that the Sahara got a lot wetter, which is a sign that the climate suddenly warmed up for a while before cooling down again. After 12,500 years ago, the Sahara became a much greener place, like a savanna, because a weather pattern called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a mouthful indeed, moved north during summer. This wet period was at its best around 4,000 years ago, when temperatures were a bit warmer than today. At that time, more rain fell in the Ethiopian highlands, which made the Nile River carry more sediment. However, there was another big change called a Heinrich event, which caused the intertropical convergence zone to move back south. This led to the Sahara and Arabian regions drying out quickly. Because of this, the Nile River had much less flooding between 2700 and 2100 BCE. Long story short, well, too late for that. The Sahara has gone through wet and dry cycles due to changes in the climate and weather patterns over thousands of years. Up until recently, we've known about the Sahara in its dry era, but in September 2024, an unusual cyclone rolled through. It hit Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya, and filled those dry lakes and rivers. The satellite images from NASA of before and after the rains are stunning. It's like the Sahara has had a makeover. Some areas in North Africa received up to 8 inches of rain. For comparison, Seattle gets about 40 inches per year, only 5 times what the Sahara received. I say only for one simple reason. Seattle has a reputation for being quite rainy, while the Sahara does not. The tricky part is those 8 inches. Essentially, the entire yearly quota for this area fell in a matter of moments. So, in a way, it might have felt rainier in the Sahara than in Seattle. The mountains funnel the water into ephemeral lakes in northern Algeria, which recently expanded to over 70 square miles and reached depths of more than 7 feet. That's enough water to sustain it for a year. So what exactly are these ephemeral lakes? Well, they're basins that fill up for a short time each year, but might stay dry for several years if the rain doesn't cooperate. Sometimes water flows into them from a small surrounding area, or it can just be good old-fashioned rain. Now, a big question arises: how come these lakes exist in the first place? Well, generally they form because there's excess water trapped on the surface. But the soil in the Sahara is incredibly dry. Shouldn't it act like a sponge? It must be thirsting for moisture. Well, think about how eagerly your potted plant drinks up water when you return home from a vacation. However, no matter how parched it is, dry soil can only absorb a limited amount of water, which is often quite small. And just like your potted plant, it doesn't necessarily drink it all. You might simply be overwatering. Or, if you check the saucer below, you could find a mini flood. Another significant factor preventing the soil from absorbing water is the lack of vegetation. Under normal conditions, trees, shrubs, and various plants help retain moisture. In the desert, however, it's nearly impossible. There may be a few palm trees, but that's about it. This also explains the formation of those temporary lakes. Precipitation that isn't held by plants accumulates in low-lying valleys and depressions, creating these fleeting bodies of water. These lakes may only last for a limited time, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't have names. For instance, the beautiful lake adorned with swaying palms that you see is called Lake Yasmina, located in the oasis town of Merzoga. In certain areas of the desert, where the dunes rise, it may appear as though you're looking at a mirage, but it's not. The sand dunes are partially covered by water. Remember how I mentioned 8 inches? Well, that's not entirely accurate for some regions. In fact, there are places where the flooding is so extensive that the palms are submerged up to their crowns. Now, the last time we saw a downpour this intensive was 30 to 50 years ago. But this rain is more than welcome. After 6 consecutive years of drought, Morocco really needed it. Lakes that had been dry for decades, like Lake Ariki, are finally getting some much-needed water. A recent analysis revealed that out of the hundreds of storms that have hit the region since 2000, only 6 brought enough rain to start filling up this lake. And of those, only 2 resulted in a lake level higher than what we saw in September 2024. So while this torrential rain seems like a blessing, the big question is, will it last? The answer is yes. When humid air from near the equator meets the hot, dry air from the north, the Sahara Desert tends to get more rain. Scientists say this collision zone is shifting further north as the planet warms, and it warms, so it's likely to keep moving that way over the next couple of decades. So I seem a bit overly optimistic about this, and the truth is, the news isn't entirely positive. The reality is that no one was truly prepared for a flood situation like this. Moreover, remember that this isn't some Southeast Asian country where people are accustomed to dealing with water. This is the bone-dry Sahara. That said, I think you know what I'm getting at. Tragically, at least 18 people lost their lives to the intense rains in southern Morocco. The authorities are gearing up for even more heavy rain in the region. But if that's the case, could it mean the Sahara is facing extinction? And what would that even mean for us? It might sound a bit strange, but our planet actually relies on deserts, and the Sahara is no different. At first glance, it may seem like a barren wasteland, and it's nothing to write home about. But deserts play a crucial role in our ecosystem. They act as major carbon storage sites and are considered net carbon sinks, with the Sahara alone holding an estimated 1 trillion metric tons of carbon. In the fight against climate change, these existing deserts are like a buffer, helping to keep the temperatures within acceptable levels. Yeah, deserts are scorching hot, but they act as the world's air conditioning. Plus, desert sands are an unexpected source of nutrients for lush areas like tropical rainforests. Believe it or not, scientists have found that the sand particles from the Sahara have a hand in nurturing the Amazon rainforest. These particles travel across the Atlantic Ocean, riding the winds all the way to South America, where they enrich the soil in the Amazon basin. Without the Sahara, experts believe the Amazon rainforest could face serious collapse. You plan to spend your summer vacation in Africa. The final destination is the Sahara Desert. It's located in northern Africa, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. You're excited to ride camels and learn about the region's rich cultures. You hop on an extensively long flight, and finally, you are here. You find yourself in the world's biggest hot desert. Can you believe it's 3 million square miles? You're ready for your first adventure after drinking liters of ice-cold water. The guide gives you a choice. You can spend 2 weeks visiting a collection of oases, or you can help them solve an ongoing local mystery. Deep into the desert, near this Algerian town, lies a mystery begging to be solved. A collection of huge, spotted circles in the sand. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles in a straight line. The circles were first identified via Google Earth images several years ago. People have debated them for years, but no one seems to know the answer. The strange thing is that they are so many miles away from any towns, roads, or human activity. The quickest way to discover the truth behind the circles is asking questions. You grab your notebook and set out to talk to locals. Everyone is helpful in this scenario: geographers, anthropologists, elders, and historians. The first person you talk to is a map expert. You need to understand if those circles were authentic or a satellite glitch. You end up interviewing the people who take Google Earth satellite pictures. The circles are really there. They appear in multiple pictures from many years. Then, let's understand why they are there in the first place. After 2 days of interviews, you have your first lead. The circles could be the result of oil activity. Experts explained why this would make sense. Algeria is a rich area for natural resources, so this would be a sensible guess. Usually, to find out if there is anything worth extracting, companies would undertake seismic surveys. Seismic surveys are a way of analyzing the Earth's surface by sending shock waves into the ground. Depending on how these waves bounce back, you'll know what is located there. A special vehicle could have marked the soil that way. So, did we unravel the mystery? Not quite so. As you know, the Sahara Desert is one of the driest areas on the planet. The average high temperatures in summer are over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. To survive there, people need to find ways of accessing water. So, these circles could be a kind of ruin or leftovers from ancient water wells. Again, I'd say this is a sensible guess. Ready for some fact-checking? Some anthropologists agree that these circles could be ancient fogueras. Foguera is the name of a 2,500-year-old style of irrigation system, usually found in northern Africa. It is also known as a kanat in other places in northern Africa. Locals would dig a deep well at an elevated point, deep enough to tap into underground water. They would then dig parallel shafts at regular distances. Then they would dig an underground channel that connected the city to the well. Solely with the help of gravity, water would run from the well to the city. This traditional technology provided water for crops, livestock, and humans. Now, let's say these wells made human-made oases possible. Even the closest municipality name was an indication that this could be true. The name Fogaret Esaoya is actually named after Fogares, these ancient wells. Now, this lead was proving to be very accurate. You decide to travel over there to see for yourself. You take a local bus, sit back, and enjoy the ride. The landscape in northern Algeria is filled with ancient-looking towns. You even see ruins of wells along the way, on the outskirts of smaller cities. Opening Google satellite images, you can see the Qanat's markings on the ground, a series of holes running down several miles. But as soon as you arrive, you find out you were wrong. Dale Lightfoot, one of the world's leading experts on Qanats, said that the circles were definitely not Qanats. Even the satellite images confirm this difference. Uh-oh, we were so close. Apparently, Qanats or Fogares would not run down a straight line. They wouldn't be shaped like circles. Another clue that this wasn't the case was that there were no towns at the end. The circles were really far away from any human activity, and Qanats were explicitly built to provide water for human settlements. Well, it sure was a good try. You almost gave up on this mystery when you decided to take one more field trip. It was days of preparation, pick up cars, food, equipment, all so that the mystery of the Sahara Circles could be unraveled. On the first day, you drove over 99 miles into the desert. You were always curious to see what this part of the world looked like. Over there, you see nothing but mustard yellow dunes. The night sky is pretty decent though. You can see the entire Milky Way with your own eyes. You set up camp and sleep under a canopy of stars. The next day, tension grows. There's no cell reception. Oh dear. But thankfully, you added the coordinates of the circles to your Google map. And surprise, the offline mode works out there. You follow the coordinates, but it leads you astray. You start to get nervous, thinking this was all in vain. But you and the team get into the car and drive a few more miles past the coordinates on your phone. After a very bumpy ride, you can't believe your eyes. There it is, an enormous crater dug on the sand, surrounded by 12 smaller holes. From up high, it looks like a clock, without the pointers, of course. On the ground, they're very faint, so faint you almost miss them. Searching the area, you notice all the holes had something similar, metal wires, thin wires that you can pull from the ground. They're buried deep, so you start digging. An object starts to reveal itself. Uh-oh, it looks like old dynamite. This certainly surprises you. Better stop digging to avoid any accidents. At the end of the survey, you feel satisfied, but still curious. What could all this dynamite mean? And who put it there? What comes next is the turning point of your adventure. Walking back to the car, you see something shining on the ground. You approach the item with curiosity. It's round and rusty and looks like a sardine can? What's that doing here? Could this give you more clues about the circle's mystery? Just in case, you pick it up and put it in the car. Back in the city, the puzzle pieces start to reveal the story behind the Sahara Circles. You bring photos and the sardine can and show them to local experts. They analyze your material and give you an intriguing verdict. As it turns out, guess number 1 was the closest one to the truth. So, what happened to the first guess? Why do we need to keep digging deeper? Well, because it was only half right. The Sahara Circles are not a historical footprint of seismic surveying. Back when the circles were made, this technology didn't even exist. But they sure are related to oil exploration. The dynamite-filled holes were an old method for oil searching. The circles are the leftovers of surveyors looking for resources underground. And the sardine cans? Well, they were left by the workers who held explosion works. You gotta eat, right? According to the model of the can, this happened more or less around the 1950s and 1960s. So these circles aren't even that ancient. More like modern ones, if you ask me. Well. Hope you are glad you tagged along and helped unravel this mystery. See you in the next mystery-solving adventure.
The Great Pyramid was created as the final resting place of ancient Egyptian monarch Khufu. According to legend, French leader Napoleon entered the Great Pyramid and came back out looking shaken and super pale. He never revealed what he saw inside, but whatever it was is said to have affected him for the rest of his life. When Napoleon entered the pyramid, he would have walked through a super tight and ascending passageway. He'd then go through another passageway, known as the Great Chamber. This corridor would have been much taller than the previous one, and would have cobbles too. He'd then reach the King's Chamber, the centerpiece of the Great Pyramid, which was lined with huge blocks of granite. But it wouldn't have looked as grand as we might imagine. There are no hieroglyphics decorating its walls, as Egyptians only began decorating the burial chambers of pyramids much later on. The pharaoh's tombs deep inside the pyramid would have also been filled with treasures, from chunks of gold to the world's most expensive jewelry. But this would have all been looted a long time ago. The only thing that probably would have been left in there would have been a huge sarcophagus, which would have once contained the king's mummy. He'd also have to walk past the queen's chamber. This room most likely didn't hold any queens though, as pyramids were usually only built for one person. There are mysterious tunnels leading from here. To this day, no one is really sure what they're there for. And that's not the only mysterious and creepy thing Napoleon may have encountered, as stories of pharaohs leaving ancient curses on pyramids go way back. Many pyramids had warnings written on the outside, telling of horrifying things that would happen to those who entered and disturbed the peace. We might not know what exactly Napoleon found in the Great Pyramid that scared him so much, but we know for sure what was found in Tutankhamun's tomb. Tutankhamun was an ancient Egyptian pharaoh who was only 8 or 9 years old when he took to the throne. He became a cultural phenomenon when his tomb was discovered almost completely intact in 1922. His pyramid sits in the Valley of Kings in Thebes, modern Luxor, which is in Egypt. Unlike the Great Pyramid, Tutankhamun's tomb was covered in beautiful wall decorations. The walls told the story of how he would travel to the afterlife through the underworld. Egyptians believed all people would have to take this journey, so they would fill their tombs with objects and paintings to help them get there. There'd also be spells painted on the walls. They believed this would help people pass over to the next realm. The journey would be pretty long, and for that reason, the ancient Egyptians would also fill the pyramids with food. Tutankhamun's pyramid was filled with 8 fruit baskets. They even found something called gingerbread fruit in there. The rooms were jam-packed with furniture, statues, clothes, and staffs, amongst a whole bunch of other things. You'd likely find a lot of clothes and expensive jewelry in the pyramids as well. The ancient Egyptians wanted their ancestors to travel in style to the afterlife. They put Tutankhamun in his final resting place with over 50 pieces of clothing, all of the highest quality. There were tunics, scarves, gloves, and headdresses, and a ton of jewelry. Bracelets, pendants, necklaces, rings, and scarabs for protection were all found inside. Each of them was made of gold or precious stones. There were also fans made of ostrich feathers to keep the old pharaoh cool in the hot Egyptian sun. But the temperature inside the pyramids never actually went above 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The ancient Egyptians developed a super cool air conditioning system that we don't fully understand even today. Tutankhamun's pyramid also contained 130 walking sticks made from ebony, ivory, silver, and gold to help him on his journey. There were 3 chariots hidden away in case he got tired of all the walking. They also put 11 boat paddles inside, but there was no sign of any boat. The pyramids would be littered with the pharaoh's favorite scents and perfumes. During the excavation of Tutankhamun's pyramid, it quickly became clear that it had been robbed during ancient times. There was damage to doors and traces of oils left in empty jars. It looks like someone raided the pyramid for gold and the scents, perfumes, and oils that had been left for King Tut. there was still a bit of perfume, which was made from coconut oil and frankincense, left in one bottle. It seems like Pharaoh Tutankhamun loved board games. There was an ivory traveling set of senet in his pyramid. Although we don't know for sure exactly how to play it, we have figured out it was sort of an ancient Egyptian version of backgammon. It looks like it was a two-player game where the goal was to knock your opponent off the board. Not really sure who Tutankhamun's mummy was supposed to play with, though. The ancient Egyptians had some rituals that may seem pretty strange to us. For example, they used to shave their eyebrows off if they ever lost a cat. So it's not too surprising they put some really weird things inside pyramids. Archaeologists discovered a collection of mummified cats and scarab beetles in pyramids that date back more than 4,000 years. They were found in the pyramids of Saqqara, which is south of Cairo. They also found a bunch of makeup kits and mirrors inside. Makeup was worn proudly by both men and women in ancient Egyptian times. Eyeliner was the most popular cosmetic. The Rosetta Stone was one of the best discoveries ever made in pyramids. It was found by our man Napoleon Bonaparte and his team. It's a black granite rock that dates back to 196 BCE. It's transcribed in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic. When it was translated in 1822, we got the key to understanding ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics for the very first time. The discovery of Queen Hatshepsut's mummy in 1903 changed our understanding of the Egyptians forever. After she had passed away, her successor, Thutmose III, removed most of the evidence of her reign, so we basically knew nothing about Egypt's first great female leader. She's now gone on to become one of the few and most famous female pharaohs of Egypt. Pharaoh Khufu even had a fully fledged boat in his pyramid. Archaeologists uncovered more than 1,200 pieces of a giant boat near the Great Pyramid at Giza. They reassembled the boat, and it's a whopping 144 feet long. It's most likely a solar boat, which was designed to carry the resurrected king with the deity Ra. Fun fact, the Pyramid of Giza is the last remaining of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The other 6 are the Hanging Gardens, the Colossus, the Temple of Artemis, the Mausoleum, the Lighthouse, and the Statue of Zeus. This pyramid was also the world's tallest man-made structure for 3,800 years, and it's the biggest pyramid in Egypt. It took a staggering 2.3 million blocks of limestone, and some weighed as much as 80 tons. It took an incredible 100,000 laborers and a whopping 23 years to build. Its original height was a mega 480 feet. In 2017, archaeologists discovered something weird about Egypt's Great Pyramid. There's a hidden void that's at least 100 feet long, and no one really knows why it's there or what's actually inside it. The weird void is the first inner structure discovered within the 4,500-year-old pyramid since the 1800s. Scientists used cosmic rays to detect the massive hole, but are still no closer today to finding out what's inside. The ancient Egyptians took a lot of care building the pyramids, and everything was strategically placed and structurally sound, so it's super unlikely that this hole is due to blocks falling over time. Loads of pyramids also contain small model figurines called ushabti. These represented attendants. They believed they would come to life to serve the pharaohs in the afterlife. But it's amazing that all this stuff actually fit inside. There isn't actually a huge amount of space inside the structures. It's mostly just rock.
Under the burning sun, among the sand dunes, somewhere in the Sahara Desert, you're walking in search of an ancient treasure. Finally, you find a strange rock in the sand. It's big, looks like a large piece of black coal or rock, but something shiny on its surface makes the rock unusual. This unique find is the oldest thing that has ever been discovered on our planet. This rock was born long before Earth appeared in outer space. The unusual meteorite was found in 2020 in a remote area of the Sahara Desert. Scientists have analyzed the isotopes of magnesium and aluminum on the stone's surface and found that its age is about 4.5 billion years. At the moment, this is the oldest sample of magma from space in history. It belongs to a small protoplanet that didn't have time to form completely. It happened a very long time ago when our solar system was forming. Many huge asteroids were floating in space. Some of them were formed into huge celestial bodies, which later became planets. The big rocky planets were absorbing the smaller ones. The rock was part of a little protoplanet that just began its formation, but another huge asteroid destroyed it. The planet shattered into billions of pieces. Some of them became part of other planets, some flew outside the solar system, and one piece that had been wandering in space until our Earth was formed. After that, it hit the planet's atmosphere and fell into the territory now known as the Sahara Desert. The rock was discovered in 2020, but the erosion of extraterrestrial rocks shows that it could have fallen much earlier. This ancient thing weighing around 70 pounds has several pieces of different meteorites inside. In simple words, it's a volcanic rock consisting of lava. It has cooled, solidified, and crystallized. That's why you notice the glitter. Scientists hope that further study of the rock will help to learn more about our solar system foundation. The biggest asteroid discovered in the U.S. is the Willamette. Its size is 84 square feet, and its weight is more than 15 tons. This is half the weight of a bus. Several people can fit on the surface of this outer space object. But the coolest thing is that it's not a rock like most meteorites that were found. Willamette is made of nickel and iron. This massive piece of metal was discovered in 1906. Now, the huge rock is kept at the American Museum of Natural History. The largest meteorite ever found is Hoba. It's located in Namibia, and people have never changed its position because it's too heavy. The weight of Hoba is 60 tons. It's heavier than a tank. The next space-related event occurred on February 28 in southwest England. On this day, a huge flash lit up the sky. Then there was a loud crash. Several residents opened the doors of their houses and noticed a black sooty spot on the lawn. They immediately guessed what had happened and reported the discovery to the British Meteorite Observation Network. If you ever find a meteorite, report it to some geological research or space center as soon as possible. The longer a space rock lies on the ground, the faster it loses its value. Rain, dust, snow, wind, scorching sun, all these factors damage the surface of the meteorite. It makes it difficult to study the celestial object. The meteorite found in England looks like coal, but it's way softer and more fragile. It most likely used to contain frozen water. The rock is part of a huge asteroid that plowed through outer space when our solar system hadn't fully formed yet. They found a unique combination of minerals inside the rock. It can help scientists learn more about the origins of the solar system and life on Earth. Now we're heading to Germany, to the small town of Nördlingen. A huge ancient meteorite's hidden here. It's very difficult to notice it unless you know the secret of this town. You're walking along the cozy little streets and looking at the buildings with beautiful architecture. You spend the whole day there and don't find anything that reminds you of a meteorite. To solve the mystery, you need to get out of town. So you climb a high hill and see that the city is located inside a pit. For a long time, locals were sure the house was located in the crater of an extinct volcano. If you look at the houses from a certain angle, you may notice an unusual shining coming from them. In the middle of the 20th century, a group of geologists came here and immediately declared that the crater doesn't look like a volcanic one. The town was built on a huge crater left by a meteorite. The huge celestial body fell here about 15 million years ago. It was so hot that the carbon bubbles inside instantly turned into small diamonds. When people were building this city, they didn't know they were using expensive stones, since the diamonds were hardly visible. The locals never attached importance to the fact that the city walls shine unusually in the sun. Now they believe this place was built from diamonds that had fallen from the sky. Our next stop is in the UK again. This time the rocks are of an earthly origin. The famous Stonehenge. People place circles of rocks here in a certain order. Everyone knows about this archaeological monument, but no one knows the reason for its creation for certain. Another construction built out of mysterious rocks was discovered just 2 miles away. It's called Superhenge. It's bigger, heavier, and takes up more space. Each plate here is 15 feet, which is about the height of 2 floors. Once, the stone stood vertically and formed a huge semicircle, but someone pushed the stones over about 4,500 years ago. It was a college prank. No, not really. That's why they couldn't be detected for a long time. Scientists still can't solve the mystery of Stonehenge, but they believe the standing vertical stones were part of some huge monument. Some other amazing rocks are located in the south of Costa Rica. There are big ones, the size of a human, and there are smaller ones, the size of bowling balls. And they all have a perfectly round shape. These giant rocky spheres were created by people. It must have taken years of polishing using stone tools to get the perfect round shape. These balls are incredibly heavy, but can easily roll like a basketball. All the rocks are of a different age. Some of them were created about 2,500 years ago. Most of them are made of molten volcanic magma. Until now, scientists don't know for what purpose these stones were used. They were found in different parts of Costa Rica, near big cities. It's possible that ancient civilizations installed them specifically to show the greatness of local kings. Also, many experts believe the rocks were used as a tool for studying astronomy. The people who knew their purpose of the rocks had disappeared, and the history of the stones was lost along with them. Let's finish our journey with the coolest archaeological find. You're walking through the desert of Peru and climbing a low hill. You look down and notice the surface of the hill is covered with strange lines. You walk far away and see a huge cat on the hill. Such a drawing is called a geoglyph. Its length is around 120 feet, which is about half the size of a Boeing commercial jet. Archaeologists discovered the giant cat in 2020 and found out that it had been created somewhere between 200 and 100 BCE. This huge drawing is part of a mysterious group of different pictures. In addition to the cat, there are other animals, plants, and fantastic figures. All of them were found in the desert of Peru. The kitten was found by chance. Archaeologists didn't see it at first because natural erosion on the hillside had almost erased the silhouette.
One of the most unexplored and mysterious places on Earth is located in plain sight. It's one of the most majestic monuments of humankind. The wonder of the ancient world hides a secret that scientists and archaeologists still can't solve. This is the Great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt. The huge sculpture of a lion with a human head was carved out of rock about 4,500 years ago. Scientists still don't know the exact date of its creation and are also unaware of who built it and what for. There are many assumptions and theories, but none of them has been confirmed. Most people have seen this majestic sculpture either in photographs or in reality, but almost no one knows what's hidden underneath it. The statue of the Sphinx was carved from a single piece of limestone. It was painted. The remains of color pigment on the surface prove this. In the distant past, the Sphinx looked much brighter and more colorful than what we see now. But even after thousands of years, its greatness hasn't diminished. And by the way, Sphinx is not the real name. It was invented by the Greeks about 100 years or more after its creation. Initially, the Egyptians called the statue Hor-em-Akhet. There are many legends and theories saying the Sphinx is there for a reason. It's like a watchdog that guards the tomb of the pharaoh and the secrets of ancient Egypt. These legends become more plausible when archaeologists discovered hidden entrances at the feet of the Sphinx. They believe that these secret passages are the beginning of the tunnels leading to the halls with treasures. You can find a lot of stories on the internet that claim the Sphinx hides the Hall of Records, a repository filled with ancient and secret knowledge. One of the main artifacts of this repository is supposed to be the records of the ancient mythical state of Atlantis. According to legends, the entire library from this city was moved under the Sphinx. The entrance to this library must be located next to the Sphinx's right paw. Many archaeologists tried to find this entrance, but came away empty-handed. Also, there are many images with detailed diagrams of the underground city that consists of a network of tunnels and chambers under the Sphinx. Someone says there are structures as tall as 12-story buildings hiding underground, but there's no evidence of this. Archaeologists, even after millennia, continue to explore the mysterious sculpture. At the same time, many Egyptians don't want to learn more about the Sphinx. They're terrified of awakening something supernatural. In 1998, scientists discovered tunnels leading to empty caves under the Sphinx. They found evidence of earlier excavations there. It's quite possible that someone managed to find the treasures and take them away. Some people believe Egyptians found some kind of artifact under the Sphinx that has the power of unknown advanced technologies. The artifact is so powerful that it can change the course of history. Of course, most theories are just fairy tales of conspiracy fans, but it's a confirmed fact that the Sphinx hides a system of caves and rooms. There are so many rumors surrounding the Sphinx that it's impossible to understand what's true and what's false. In any case, it's difficult and dangerous to study the sculpture because active excavations can destroy it. And then the entrance to the underground rooms can get blocked by rocks and lost forever. Also, further exploration requires a lot of money, and financing is not always easy to find. But the main reason? It's too risky. There's no guarantee that people will be able to get out of the underground labyrinths. For these reasons, scientists and archaeologists have been exploring this majestic structure for so long. Another famous architectural monument with a secret is Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. Everyone admires the images of the U.S. presidents' faces carved into the rock, but few people know that there's a secret room hidden behind the head of Abraham Lincoln. The architect of Mount Rushmore wanted to carve slabs on the rock with the record of the main stages of the country's history. But his plan was too complicated to carry out. Then he was offered to implement it on a much smaller scale, to build a secret room inside the mountain. The idea was to save this knowledge so that future generations will always remember the history of their country. Unfortunately, the architect didn't have time to finish his work. The construction stopped for several decades. But in the late 90s, the project was resumed. Porcelain enamel panels depicting the history of the U.S. were placed in the room. It's possible that these plates will be stored there forever. But people can't see them, at least for now. The room is inaccessible to tourists as it's too difficult to get inside. Another secret room is located in the Empire State Building. More precisely, it's not even a room, but a place where you can take cool photos. Almost all tourists gather on the observation deck of the 86th floor to enjoy a stunning view of Manhattan. But there's another deck with panoramic windows on the 102nd floor. There are way fewer people there because almost no one knows about that place. Fortunately, access to this deck is open to everyone. You probably won't have to wait in line for a long time to take a photo. You'll feel special because you're in such a secret place where there are almost no people. But the coolest place is even higher, on the 103rd floor. This is a spacious observation deck where celebrities get their photographs taken. It's not a public place, but if you know the right people, you can get there. There are almost no security measures on the site. Only a low ledge between you and an abyss. That's why crowds of people are forbidden from coming here. It's not so easy to get there, and you're unlikely to succeed without a guide. First, you need to choose the right elevator that will take you there. Then you'll go through several engineering rooms filled with pipes, electrical panels, and other technical stuff. The final part of your way is a set of stairs inside a tiny corridor. And here you are, at the top of New York. Now we're in Paris. See the Eiffel Tower? Inside it, there are restaurants and observation decks. But if you try hard, you can find a secret apartment. Now it's a museum, but it was built so that people could live in it. The architect of the tower, Gustav Eiffel, created this apartment in 1889 for himself. It's almost at the very top of the Eiffel Tower. Imagine what a beautiful view he observed every day. He was the first and only tenant. No one else could gain access to this place. When the architect passed away, the apartment remained empty for a long time. Only recently, they restored it and turned it into a museum. Inside, the epoch of the last century is recreated. They even put wax figures of Gustav Eiffel, his daughter, and the American inventor Thomas Edison inside the room. This place is filled with an endless stream of passengers, office workers running late, visitors from other cities, noise, and train whistles. At Grand Central Station in New York, among all these sounds, you can hear the sound of a ball hitting a racket, if you're in the right place. A real tennis court is hidden inside New York Central Station. It belongs to a tennis club that arranges corporate games for employees of many companies. The club was opened in the 60s. Now we're moving to London, Charing Cross Road. It isn't easy to find one secret place here. To do this, you need to look carefully at your feet. Do you see these sewer grates in the asphalt? Inside them, you can notice two signs with the name Little Compton Street. Yeah, there's another street right below you. It disappeared from all maps at the end of the 19th century. Charing Cross Road was built over it. The identification signs that you see are part of old engineering tunnels. There's another interesting place in London. It's located in the southeast corner of Trafalgar Square. At first glance, it looks like a thick lamppost, but there are too many tourists walking around. You come closer and realize that one person can easily fit inside the post. The lamppost belongs not to an electrician, but to a police officer. Yeah, this is the smallest police station in the world. It was built in the 1930s and used as a watch post. Officers had to sit there one by one and watch Trafalgar Square. That always attracted a lot of pickpockets and all kinds of other criminals.
You find yourself in Africa, land of unique wildlife, home to a great variety of cultures and languages, and, first and foremost, host to the world's largest hot desert, the Sahara. It's daytime, and you are thirsty for some water and shade. You've been walking for days, trying to find one of those precious-looking oases. You feel you're near, but the horizon just keeps stretching and stretching. Your mind is tired, and your body is feeling all the heat. It's like you've eaten a full plate of hot pepper and then some more, judging by how much you're sweating. And when I say hot, think 100 degrees Fahrenheit hot, on average. No wonder this is happening. After all, you find yourself in the world's biggest hot desert. Now, I say hot desert since the biggest deserted landscapes are actually the cold ones, located in Antarctica and the Arctic. I see Antarctica's frozen desert is more or less the size of 1 million LAXs. Yep, the Los Angeles International Airport. The Arctic desert is just a bit smaller than that. Now, in case you don't know, the Sahara Desert is located in northern Africa, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean all the way over to the Red Sea. It occupies an area large enough to place approximately 100,000 Disney World theme parks side by side. According to scientists, its boundaries are expanding. Deserts usually form in the subtropics because of what's called Hadley circulation. The air rises at the equator and descends into the subtropics. This circulation of air has a drying effect, which helps the formation of desert landscapes. Since the 1920s, the Sahara is considered to have expanded by over 10%. How is this happening? Well, let's start from the beginning. You probably know the Sahara Desert as one of the most inhospitable places on Earth today. Just FYI, for a place to be considered a desert, it has to receive less than 4 inches of rain per year. Due to the very small precipitation index, deserts are usually dry and arid places. There is little humidity in the air, and daytime temperatures can go as high as 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Usually, there isn't that much animal and plant life because of the lack of water. But in the Sahara's case, it wasn't always like that. It may be difficult to imagine northern Africa without the tons of sand it has today. But about 20,000 years ago, the Sahara was actually one big oasis. Recent discoveries show clear evidence of what the scientists now call the Green Sahara. In the mid-1800s, a German explorer crossing the Sahara encountered some paintings and engravings that nomad artists had left behind. What he saw in those paintings looked nothing like his actual surroundings. Instead of an arid landscape with only camels and desert vegetation, the rock paintings depicted jungle animals like giraffes and hippos. There were even images of livestock and grazing animals such as cattle and sheep, something that seems impossible for modern-day Sahara. Artists usually draw what they see around them, so this finding really intrigued the German explorer. The drawings were so detailed that the artists must have had close contact with those animals. You can find this rock art spread out in the northern part of the African continent, from western Sahara to Saudi Arabia. Geologists soon took a keen interest in this and found the first clues to what this could mean. They have been able to confirm that, in fact, northern Africa was once much wetter. They found evidence from nearby deep-sea sediment off the coast of Mauritania. Sampled cores of underwater sand and mud, known as Saharan dust flux, show geologists that, indeed, a Green Sahara was possible. The more dust is blowing off of the desert and into the bottom of the ocean, the drier the climate in the region. The sediment cores show that there was much less dust, only half as much, coming off northern Africa during the humid period. This period has to do with Earth's natural cycles. Normally, the Earth rotates at a tilt of 23.5 degrees, but this angle is not consistent and changes over time. Earth's tilt is responsible for the amount of sunlight each hemisphere receives. It affects several ecosystem functions on the planet. During the time of the Green Sahara, the Earth received between 4 and 8% more sunlight than it does today. So, when the Earth tilted about 20,000 years ago, the northern hemisphere received more direct sunlight, which affected humidity levels in the region. As the northern hemisphere got warmer, this affected monsoon activity, more specifically, the West African monsoon. Monsoons are wind systems that affect a region's rainfall index and humidity levels. As a part of the globe gets warmer, it allows for more air to rise. It combines with the wind to draw moisture up into the atmosphere. Little by little, northern Africa also became wetter. The increased moisture made the Sahara so wet that there were actual bodies of water in the region. As vegetation grew, the plants held onto moisture better than bare sand could. There is evidence of natural basins throughout the Sahara and lakes so big they would fit all of the U.S.'s Great Lakes inside of them. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of vibrant societies in what are now arid areas. It looks like ancient cultures were able to take full advantage of the African humid period. According to researchers, the human population peaked across the Sahara about 9,000 years ago. There are traces of fireplaces, hunting tools, fishhooks, and even mounds of fish bones. Records show that there have been over 230 green periods over the span of 8 million years. Solar radiation is always changing due to natural orbital cycles. That's why Earth will most certainly see another Green Sahara moment. It might be thousands of years from now, but it will happen. The same way the Sahara turns green, it turns yellow again. Let's put it like that. All it takes is a significant axial tilt and a few years of readjusting. However, another phenomenon is calling the attention of scientists now. Recent studies by the National Science Foundation from the University of Maryland show the Sahara has expanded 10% over the past 90 years. This phenomenon is called desertification, which literally means fertile land turning into desert land. The Sahara Desert is now advancing into the semi-arid region of Sahel. In 1950, this region was home to 31 million people. Today, its population is over 100 million people. This rapid population growth has largely contributed to the Sahara's expansion. Farmers that were once nomads began settling down. Land usage grew more intense, aiding in weakening the soil. The demand for food has caused an overcropping of the land, so even more of it is turning into the desert now. The study also shows that natural climate cycles can affect rainfall in the Sahara and the Sahel. Scientists affirm that all deserts fluctuate, not only the Sahara. A desert's boundary may expand in the dry winter and contract during the wetter summer. South of the Sahara lies the Chad Basin. It is a natural body of water that now serves as an indicator of the Sahara's expansion. The Chad Basin is located in the region where the Sahara is advancing southward. An atmospheric and ocean expert from the University of Maryland explains that rainfall has reduced greatly in the entire region. Due to reduced rainfalls, there is less water across the entire basin, and even Chad Lake is drying out. Just like the Sahara, the Atacama Desert in Chile, deemed the world's driest, is also expanding. It is located north of the city of Santiago, and its southern border is expanding toward the Chilean capital. Because the climate is getting drier and drier here, the city of Santiago risks turning into an arid or semi-arid region itself. The once fertile valleys of local rivers that lived on agriculture and livestock for many generations are losing their revenues as Chilean land is turning into a desert. Since 2010, Santiago has received only a third of its annual rainfall. Outside of the city, farmers are digging holes in search of blue gold, or simply put, water. The situation here is very similar to that of Sahel. So tell me this. Were you as surprised as I was to find out what has been happening in the Sahara region? Feel free to share in the comments below. The ancient Indian texts mention beautifully decorated chariots or entire palaces called vimanas that could take off and, in a matter of seconds, fly away as far as space. Some people believe these vimanas only existed in Indian mythology. But it's also possible that they were based on a real technology that had been lost over the centuries. According to the Vedas, ancient Indian religious texts, there was the elephant vimana with several engines and many other types named after animals and birds. There was one for local travel, one for visiting different countries, and one for traveling to the moon and various planets. They could develop a great speed. One vimana had the superpower of invisibility. Another one was shaped like a sphere and was built on the winds produced by Mercury. This vimana was said to generate an enormous ray like the sun and make noise like the storm's thunder. All the vimanas were unbreakable and perfect for attacks on foes. Now, to operate a vimana, you'd need to know a lot of stuff, pretty much like today's airplane pilots, 32 secrets in total. They'd cover the aircraft structure and the secrets of taking off and maneuvering without crashing. That's a good thing. The pilot was also expected to know how to be seen and unseen, how to be hidden, how to be quick, how to manage contractions and expansion, and many other tricks. To hide the flying machine from foes, the pilot was instructed to move to the 8th atmospheric layer above the Earth and use the power of dark solar rays. This instruction might sound a bit weird, but there were others, more realistic ones, which still make sense in modern aeronautics. There are sections of ancient texts on the vimanas that focus on details like flight paths, pilot training, navigation, and even suitable clothes for pilots and recommended food for long flights. There was also a lot of technical detail about the use of heat-absorbing metals, the metals utilized, and melting points. The supporters of the theory that the vimanas were more than just myths are sure that the ancient Indians would unlikely go into all these details just for a beautiful story. So, the flying palaces might have been real and way ahead of their time, like many other great Indian inventions. Back in the 6th century BCE, an Indian physician named Sushruta basically wrote the original guide to medicine and surgery. They even called him the father of surgery for his work. Sushruta laid down the details on hundreds of medicinal plants and described complex surgical procedures. He gave instructions on nose reconstructions and skin transplants from one part of the body to another. The original method of rhinoplasty, which involved taking a piece of skin from the forehead to reconstruct the nose, is still used today. But back then, it had a slightly different purpose than surprising your followers on social media. Those nose jobs helped out folks who had lost their noses as punishment for crimes or in fights. Now, you gotta thank an ancient Indian math prodigy for the invention of zero. It might not seem like a big deal, but without it, we would have no binary system and no computers. People before the 5th century CE were only thinking about some sort of a sign to indicate nothing. The invention made addition, subtraction, and other mathematical operations a whole lot easier. You can see the oldest zero in existence carved in the wall of a temple in Gwalior, India. The Indus Valley Civilization was using rulers in 1500 BCE and earlier. Made from ivory, these rulers were found during excavations in what is present-day Pakistan and northwestern India. They were widely used in architecture with amazing accuracy. They had units corresponding to slightly over 1 inch that were marked with precise subdivisions within 5/1000ths of an inch. The next invention is more of a concept than a physical item. Standardization is all about setting the rules based on a bunch of people, things, or interests. One of its cool applications that we've all gotten used to is standard weights. Whether you're using pounds or kilograms, you need these universal measurements for weight, right? For this, we owe a big shout-out to the merchants from the Indus Valley Civilization who lived around 4,000 years ago. They were measuring everything from food grains to fancy luxury goods using these standardized weights. And their weights had decimal and binary mathematical systems going on. They didn't have high-tech gear, but they pulled off some serious precision using complex calculations and even sand for construction. Their art of standardization made its way to Persia and Central Asia, basically becoming the global weight-watching standard. So if yoga is your go-to exercise, you definitely have a personal reason to appreciate the ancient Indian geniuses. Over 5,000 years ago, during the rule of the Indus-Sarasvati civilization in northern India, yoga was first mentioned in the Vedas. Yoga was refined and shaped over the centuries until it grew into a massive teaching with over 200 sacred writings dedicated to this way of obtaining enlightenment. At the beginning of the current era, yoga got a new trajectory thanks to a Hindu writer who laid down a system of yoga in his text, the Yoga Sutras. It became a whole-body rejuvenation, a life-extending practice with poses that you are still doing on the mat today. Yoga has reached the Western world only in the 19th century, and it caught on like wildfire. Chess, the all-time top game for intellectuals, is also an Indian invention. Its ancestor was called Chaturanga, and it was a strategic board game that started gaining popularity around 3,000 years before the current era. This early Indian version of chess was played by 4 people, not 2, and had 64 squares. Each player had 8 pieces, ranging from pawns to kings, bishops to knights, and there was no standard 6-faced dice. They rolled with an oblong one. Players facing off were actually allies, forming 2 teams based on the direction they sat. Chess, that we know and love today, was first mentioned in ancient Indian literature in a legend. It said that the wife of a villain called Ravana had invented the game to amuse him. Now, the word shampoo comes from the Hindi word, which means to soothe or knead. The substance was invented in India in 1762 and was originally used for head massages, hence the name. The first shampoo was made of natural oils and herbs. British traders fell in love with the idea and brought it back with them to England. It took years for the original head massage oil to evolve into shampoo as we know it today, but it's still an Indian invention. Unlike the ancient Greeks, who wore animal skins, the Indians started cultivating cotton back in the 5th and 4th centuries before the current era. They used cotton threads to produce fabrics that soon became a huge hit in the Mediterranean and beyond. Jute and wool also have their origins in India. Cashmere, the finest and most exclusive type of wool, actually comes from the Kashmir region of India. Buttons that sit proudly on that cashmere cardigan of yours also have ancient Indian origins. Some 5,000 years ago, the Indus Valley Civilization started cutting seashells into geometric shapes with tiny holes in them. First, they were just decorations, but then people started using them to fasten clothes. Now, when you think about radio communication pioneers, Marconi's name usually steals the spotlight. He got a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909 for his groundbreaking radio work. But there's an unsung hero in the radio waves game, and his name is Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose. He spilled the beans on radio communication way back in 1895. He shot an electromagnetic wave across 75 feet at the town hall in Calcutta, and it went through walls, rang a bell, and even set off some gunpowder. Marconi took a page from Bose's book, using his invention, the mercury coherer, as a blueprint for his own two-way radio. Bose didn't patent his genius creation, so he only got his credit a century later. A gruesome discovery took place in Egypt some years ago. You want to hear about it? 16 human hands, carefully buried in 4 eerie pits. They didn't look too much like human hands at first, since they were abnormally large, but they were. Weirdly, there were only right hands, no left hands were in sight. It turned out that it points to the practice of an ancient dark ritual. Old Egyptian art and tales talked of a ceremony where warriors would present the right hand of their adversaries as proof of victory and ask for gold in return. Egyptians believed in the afterlife, so cutting off someone's hand meant you cut off their power eternally. Guaranteeing this type of defeat was interesting to the winning party. Here, the fight was between Egyptians versus Hyksos, who lived in what was once known as Canaan. Egypt has always been the center of some history-changing findings, and some time ago, this papyrus was found. If we stretched it open, it would be just a tad bigger than the height of a skyscraper. The world's tiniest skyscraper, which is located in Wichita Falls, Texas. When humans didn't write on their notes app, they wrote on this thing, made from the medulla of a papyrus plant. Around 2,000 years ago, ancient Egyptians wrote something reminiscent of a book where they describe most of their funerary traditions and their visions of the afterlife. It's considered one of the most important texts from ancient Egypt and is still sold in bookstores to this day. This ancient manuscript was unearthed from a chamber located just south of the Pyramid of Djoser, located in Saqqara. Oh yes, Djoser is the oldest pyramid in Egypt and not the Giza pyramids like most people think. So recently, the site of Saqqara buzzed with excited archaeologists who probably found one of Egypt's oldest complete mummies. They believe that this beautiful and well-preserved mummy was that of a wealthy man. He was discovered in a deep shaft, covered in layers of gold leaves. There are many symbols that show he was an important and wealthy man, like the band he wore on his head, the bracelet on his chest, and the fact that he was embalmed with a tunic, which was reserved for Egypt's finest. The most exciting part of the entire discovery was finding the resting place sealed with mortar, just as the ancient Egyptians had left it 4,300 years ago. Now this may sound weird, but back in 2008, archaeologists discovered a missing pyramid. Now it went missing because it deteriorated over the span of 4,000 years. Today, you can only see its base. It was a pretty important site back in ancient times. It is said that around the area of the pyramid, the ancients hosted a special type of ceremony where high priests would carry mummified remains of sacred bulls. Now here's a fun fact. Ancient Egyptians believed that Apis bulls were earthly incarnations of the city deity of Memphis and was connected to rites of fertility. It wasn't just any Apis bull though. They needed to be all black with a single white mark between its horns and a bunch of very specific characteristics. They were selected by the local priests and honored until they passed away. After that, they were mummified and buried in underground galleries. Meanwhile, this missing pyramid sort of disappeared around the 1800s. It was a German archaeologist who first found it in the village of Saqqara. He called it the Headless Pyramid when he first found it. But then, years after the official discovery, the desert sand came along and covered the whole thing. There were some excavations between the 19th and 20th centuries, but they weren't too systematic. That's why scientists were so thrilled when they dug an entire pyramid's base after removing the 25-foot mound of sand that was covering it. Oh, and it turns out American archaeologists are excavating a cemetery in Egypt that could contain over 1 million mummified bodies. So far, archaeologists have dug around 1,700 mummies. One of the main differences from other classic Egyptian mummies is that these people weren't kings and pharaohs. They were commoners that most likely lived about 1,500 years ago, when Egypt was controlled by the Roman and Byzantine empires. The name of the cemetery is cool though, the Way of the Water Buffalo, just in case you want to check it out on your next trip. Other than bulls and buffaloes, ancient Egyptians also liked baboons. Are you seeing a pattern here? In the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologists discovered a site filled with mummified baboons in a place called, guess what? The Valley of Monkeys. An animal wouldn't have been mummified if it wasn't considered important. Certain animals were more important than others, since they were linked to specific deities. Jackals were connected to Anubis, the ancient god of the afterlife, and cats were likened to the female deity Bastet. Baboons were a pretty big deal, since they were believed to be connected to Thoth, the deity of wisdom and advisor to Ra, one of Egypt's supreme deities. The archaeologists who studied these animals weren't too happy. They think these baboons were kept inside and were deprived of sunlight for most of their lives. They had extreme vitamin D deficiencies and they were poorly fed. Maybe Thoth got angry with these baboon keepers. Just a guess. Since there's never a boring day for archaeologists in Egypt, they also found human mummies with golden tongues. Since Egyptians were all about the afterlife, they believed that golden tongues might help a person speak once they pass to the other side. I mean, it's a long shot, but hey, why not? Some of these mummies were placed in wooden coffins with goods, such as necklaces, pottery, golden artifacts in the shape of lotus flowers, and scarab beetles, and iPhones. Just kidding. A new temple was also unearthed recently in Egypt. Scientists believe it was dedicated to honor Zeus Cassios. That deity would be a cross between Zeus, the almighty Greek deity of the sky, and Mount Cassios. While digging around the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, archaeologists spotted 2 pink granite columns poking out of the ground, and bingo. They believe these columns represented the temple's front gate and collapsed during an earthquake many years ago. And speaking of deities, there weren't only super serious deities. Recently, scientists unearthed a golden ring in a city south of Cairo. No, Frodo, it's not magical. It was a normal gold ring, but it had the depiction of the deity of fun, officially named Bes. This deity is often described in sacred texts as a happy chubby dwarf. Today, many tattoos we get are sorta deprived of any sense and are made of aesthetic purposes only. In ancient Egypt, though, women would get tattoos as a token of protection for childbirth. That's what scientists think, at least. Around the Nile region, scientists found some mummies that had well-preserved tattoos, which is a rarity since the skin deteriorates so easily. 2 of these women tattooed their lower backs, and the drawings were simple. They were mostly pictures, including that same chubby dwarf we just talked about, Bes. He also had a side hustle as the protector of women during childbirth. Now, would you believe me if I told you ancient Egyptians invented robots? No? Well, that's because that's not entirely true. Sure, they were astronomers, mathematicians, and engineers, and somehow they also squeezed an eccentric invention into that package – an automated deity some scientists called Hathor. This wooden statue had been in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for years before someone noticed its secret. With the help of an X-ray machine, specialists discovered a mechanical operating system inside it. The pulley-like axis goes from the statue's shoulder to her left leg. When the system rotates, the statue raises and lowers her hand. Hey, pick me, pick me!
There's a tiny island surrounded by the stunning clear Red Sea and a bustling underwater world. Zabargad, also known as St. John's Island, has no trees and consists mostly of peridotite, which is rich in peridot. And before you Google it, peridotite is a gemstone that has the nickname the Evening Emerald because of its sparkling green hue. Some historians believe Cleopatra herself loved peridots, and that lady could afford any jewels in the world. Geologists believe peridot forms as a result of the spreading of the seafloor. When the Earth's crust decides to part ways, rocks from deep down get pushed up to the surface. That's exactly how our treasure island formed. The African and the Asiatic continental plates bumped into each other, and rocks in the lower crust went above sea level. Peridot also comes from meteorites that have crashed into Earth, but that's really rare. Its color ranges from a brown-green color to yellowish-green to pure green. Yellowish-green is the most common shade you'll see in jewelry. This color is possible thanks to a good amount of iron in the stone. The deposits of this beauty are spread all across the world, from Vietnam to Arizona and Hawaii, Tanzania, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Norway. And then, of course, there's Zabargad. So, this place is geologically unique as it's an island built of uplifted mantle, and it's also the oldest and longest known source of peridots in the world. The first people came here for the Gemstones many centuries ago. Famous Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder mentioned in his writings that pirates had discovered Zabargad's treasures in the year 500 before the current era. The beautiful green rocks made their way to Queen Bernice of the Roman Empire. They came from the ancient trading port Berenike on the edge of Egypt's eastern desert. When the city fell in the 6th century, all work stopped, and the island with all its treasures stood alone for hundreds of years. In the 19th century, British explorers found the beautiful green island in the Red Sea and figured out it was the one described by Pliny the Elder a long time ago. Turkey did some mining here in the 20th century. Over just 4 years, they managed to collect over $2 million in peridots. They sent the gemstones to France for cutting. The work conditions on the island were nothing like a tropical fairy tale you could imagine. There was no drinking water for workers, so they had to install a gas-powered water condenser. Now, this territory belongs to the Elba National Park System. Most people come here to see the underwater beauties of the reefs. But if you look above the water, you can still see some beautiful sparkling peridots. If Christmas Island in Australia is on your travel list, plan the trip wisely. If you end up there in October or November when the wet season begins, you won't be able to enjoy a walk around. Red crabs cover the whole island like a blanket. And it's not one of those fluffy blankets you want to wrap yourself into. Over 100 million crabs are on a mission to reach the shore alive, marking a crucial phase in their life cycle. For the majority of the year, these red crabs reside in burrows and rock crevices. They have fruits, berries, fallen leaves, and various organic matter to keep them going. But when the dry season is over and the moon is in a specific phase, they know it's time to go. When they reach the coast of the Indian Ocean after several days of migration, they create deep burrows where females will eventually hatch their eggs. Once the burrows are ready, the male crabs return to the rainforests and the females stay at the beach for at least 12 days to keep the family going. The new parents are so smart, they follow the moon to pick the perfect moment with a milder tide to carry their eggs to the water. Once they hatch, the crabs bring their new family members back inland. There, they wait for the rainy season again to keep the circle of life going. To safeguard this magic, authorities close road in areas where crab migration takes place. Japan has a brand new addition to its archipelago. The world's newest landmass literally popped up in November 2023. This unnamed island is just over 300 feet in diameter. It's made of pumice and tuff left by an undersea volcano that kicked off its eruptions in October. The volcanic hustle has quieted down since then, and the waves are eroding chunks of the newly found land. Without lava flows to create a sturdy protective crust over the soft volcanic debris, the future of this freshly formed island is unstable. Similar islands had popped up before but were short-lived and vanished once volcanic activity ceased. An island born in 2021 the same way is still visible today though, so the newborn island might have some life prospects. If not, we're likely to see more territories like this. Japan is super rich in active volcanoes on land, with over 100 in its collection. If you make friends with the Uros people living in the Lake Titicaca area and ask them for their address to send a postcard, they will have a hard time answering. Their ancestors from more than 500 years ago came up with a brilliant invention to protect themselves from the Incas. They built islands from totora roots and reeds that could be moved away from danger deep into the lake. Totora plants help the local community a lot since it's water resistant and is used for all sorts of things, from building boats to roofs and mattresses. The islets are even edible, and the flowers of the plant they're made of are used for tea. So there are around 120 islets still preserved, and over 1,000 people can live on them. From 2 to 6 families share one islet home. Since there's no need to run away from the Incas anymore, they need to make sure the islets stay in one place. Every 15 to 20 days, the reeds forming the islets decay and need to be replaced. To prevent constant drifting, locals use eucalyptus rods as anchors, firmly securing the islets. Despite their small size, these islets have two spoken languages. The residents craft their fabric and create stunning outfits. Solar panels provide sufficient power for them to have light and even TVs. The main islet has a radio station, and the locals have embraced tourism. You can make a reservation online and experience the floating life yourself. Some islands pop out of nowhere, and others disappear without a trace. One of the most famous so-called phantom islands is High Brazil off the coast of Ireland. Before you ask, no, it doesn't have anything to do with Brazil. High is a variation of I, which means island, and Brazil comes from the root bres, meaning mighty, great, beautiful in Irish, and it gave the name to one of the local deities. This tiny mist-covered island was first mapped in 1325, but later attempts to pinpoint its exact location didn't come to one result. So, legend has it that the island appears only once in 7 years, and even those who claim to have seen it say they had just sailed right through it without bumping into any land. Captain John Nisbet shared the story of how he had not only spotted High Brazil, but got stranded on it with his crew. According to him, the island boasted a castle and was mostly uninhabited. There was even an encounter with an ancient grave gentleman who shared the island's ancient history over a lavish feast. In the late 15th century, a series of expeditions set sail from Bristol to find the famous island. All attempts failed, and High Brazil disappeared from the maps in 1865. We might never find out if it was there in the first place, but it's a beautiful story anyway.
Now here's something. Baltic amber is one of the most common resins found in the world. The reason for this is that due to the vast forests of pine, their numerous deposits are so common they provide wonderful treasures from long ago. Ants are especially common in the Baltic amber, which comes from pine trees. Its resin is rich in sugar, so the ants often live amongst the trees, close to the easy source of food. One block found in East Germany has preserved one ant that is estimated to be about 48 million years old. Think of the birthday cake. But what makes this find interesting is another animal inside the amber. It's a mite, notorious hunters in the insect world, capable of traveling at great speed. These guys quickly latch onto their hosts, sucking them dry. They're also capable of destroying entire hives in one go. And within this piece of amber, the amber provides a display of their final struggle. In Southeast Asia, feathers belonging to something unique have been found from 80 million years ago. They were captured in resin during the Cretaceous period, a peak time for dinosaurs. The many feathers inside are from the coelurosaur. It looks like a dinosaur, but this animal is more related to birds. Other feathers like this have been found in resin. They belong to avian and other non-flying dinosaurs. The discoveries have helped reimagine what dinosaurs actually look like. Still, dinosaurs may have had feathers instead of being completely bald. Of course, for most of them, the feathers weren't used for flying, but they helped the dinos stay warm. However, the feathers weren't all that was found, and a part of the coelurosaur's tail is also preserved. Still, it's so small and ancient that its DNA hasn't survived to map their entire genome. The enclosed tail is also very delicate, and it can't be removed from its protective amber shell. But although these findings can only be observed, they've still provided a great insight in the evolution of birds. But how does amber preserve things so effectively, even at the initial stages? The trees produce the resin to protect any small gaps in the bark against feeding insects. Its antiseptic nature and lack of water content ensures it doesn't degrade for a long time. This also makes it more resilient as it petrifies over long periods, eventually becoming a fossil. Some of the oldest amber ever found was from the Triassic period, showing how long it can last. The pieces from Italy are about 230 million years old. And inside one of these ancient droplets holds the oldest arthropod ever recorded. This mite found inside has provided a broader understanding to their evolution. Today, they're known to mainly annoy gardeners by feeding on the petals of flowering plants. However, at the time the mite was caught, flowers didn't have any petals, and it would be without this tasty meal for another 100 million years. Now, 100 million years ago, Myanmar was part of Gondwana, the great supercontinent. At that time, Myanmar wasn't part of Asia yet. But it was still lush with a great forest, which contained many species of lizards that lived amongst the undergrowth, hiding away from dinosaurs. Many of them have been stored within amber. This fact helped discover ancestors of geckos and chameleons. By using CT scans, scientists have analyzed them, providing a glimpse into the formation of their scales, teeth, feet, and claws. It also provided an understanding of how these archaic creatures once appeared. Although mostly pieces of lizards, by using modern technology, the scientists have been able to create 3D images of the lizard. These images can reveal how those guys appeared in their full form. The images show that they still retain some of their exact features to this day, like the chameleon's sticky pads used for climbing. A salamander fossil from around 20 million years ago is one of the most intact specimens ever found in amber. Details of its final moments show that it had been attacked before getting stuck in the resin. However, what's confusing about this find from the Miocene era is that the amber was found in the Caribbean, but it came from a tree that's closer related to those from East Africa. The lizard also has ancestry from the same area. Finds like this have opened a whole new understanding about how these small lizards migrated. It's expected that they would have ridden fallen logs, which took them across the seas to new homelands, not only to the Caribbean, but to all continents except for Antarctica. Nobody goes there, it's too cold. In the Dominican Republic, you can find some of the rarest of all ambers. This Dominican amber came from neotropical forests from around 20 million years ago. Many of the trees that made the resin are now extinct. The amber is almost completely see-through and can come in an array of beautiful colors. The most common colors are red, yellow, and even blue, and are easily mistaken for gemstones. One was found with a flea caught in it, dating to when the forest was at its peak and the mammalian variety thrived. Fleas were likely common at the time, and this flea in particular had recently fed on a mammal before getting stuck. However, something more intriguing was found within the flea. While scientists checked what mammal DNA was within the flea, they found that it was carrying an ancient bacterial blight. These blights have been constant throughout Earth's history, dramatically decreasing populations of animals and plants. This now extinct blight in the amber helped scientists determine how much the bacteria have evolved and how it spread. Now, most remnants of insects inside amber aren't much more than the exoskeleton bodies. But with some found in Myanmar, they were so well preserved that even the color of the insects is still intact. Colors in nature appear in three different ways. The first is bioluminescence, that's produced by a chemical reaction within a living organism. The second is about pigments, where the color appears in an animal or plant tissue. The third is called structural coloration, and the production of colors here is explained by microscopic surfaces fine enough to react with the light. The rare insects in amber were found in the form of structural coloration, but only at specific wavelengths. It all explains the very intense colors rarely found. 99 million years later, these bugs can still show their vibrant colors – blue, purple, and green. Some of them appear so different in color and shape that they almost look like they're from another world. Which of course they are, a very old one. Ants have been around for about 168 million years, based on fossil evidence provided. They're well known for their social hierarchies and their hive mind system. They've dominated almost every corner of the insect world, but when these social capabilities came about have been difficult to determine. Yet, recently, amber dated from 100 million years ago has shed some light into their evolution. Several amber pieces have preserved various ant types, including the worker ants, guardian or soldier ants, and even a queen ant. Before these pieces were found, it was estimated their social nature occurred millions of years later. A piece of amber dated 100 million years ago helped shed light on the evolution of birds. A perfectly preserved bird that hatched preserved in amber was already equipped with its flight feathers. With the earlier physical abilities, they would be capable of moving around the nest by themselves at a very young age, and it's expected they could search for their own food almost immediately. But as birds continue to evolve and spend more time in the skies, their brain developed larger for their cognitive abilities. After hatching, their early development was then more focused on the brain, and the chicks slowly became more reliant on their parents over time. In Spain, a massive treasure trove of amber and other fossils has been found. Inside, there were remnants of an entire ecosystem that existed 110 million years ago. A bunch of individual fossils were found. The vast collection includes many types of insects, mollusks, arachnids, plants, 50 different dinosaur bone fragments, feathers, and hair from mammals, and a McDonald's burger wrapper. Nah, just kidding. With the abundance of findings, it's helped researchers understand the ancient terrestrial ecosystem that once existed. With loads of specific details of the environment, they've reconstructed the swamp. This way, it's now possible to experience what it was like in the world of dinosaurs.
When you hear the word mummy, you might get a chill down your spine. That's because most of us associate this word with those creepy characters we've seen in some scary movies. But in reality, mummies have helped us understand a lot about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and about how people used to deal with losing their loved ones. The people most famous worldwide for their mummies are the ancient Egyptians. They believed that some sort of existence after passing away was possible, if certain conditions were met. That's why they insisted on preserving the human body through the process of mummification and placing the mummy in a furnished tomb, kind of like giving it a fully functioning apartment of its own. Why did they believe in this? Well, because they were deeply connected to their natural environment for the most part. They saw the natural cycles around them, like how the sun rose every day, followed by the moon, or how new life was always sprouting from plants, even after they had wilted away. They also believed that the powerful spirit Osiris, who represented the cycle of passing away and resurrection, played a role in this process. To prepare for the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians followed certain rituals, like mummification, which involved using materials like honey, resins, and incense to preserve the body. There's no other mummy more popular than that of King Tut. He was a young pharaoh who ruled over 3,000 years ago in Egypt. The problem with discovering ancient royal tombs is that most of such burial sites were previously robbed. People knew ancient rulers had been left with many valuable belongings, so those locations became vulnerable to thieves. When King Tut's tomb was opened in 1922, people were excited because it had not been robbed, like many other previously discovered royal tombs. That's how well hidden it was. Inside, his mummy was encapsulated in a total of 3 coffins, including one made of gold. The objects found in his tomb showed us what ancient Egypt was like, and studying his mummy also helped us learn about the culture and practices popular at the time when he passed away. We also learned about his family by looking at his DNA. Scientists were able to discover that he had had a disease called malaria and a problem with his foot that might have made it hard for him to walk. Ramses II was another pharaoh in Egypt who ruled for 68 years, which was quite a lot back in the day. He was known for his expansion campaigns and building projects. Many objects from his time as a ruler still exist today, including a large statue of him. Ramses II was about 6 feet tall and lived to be about 90 years old. After looking at his mummy, scientists concluded that he may have had a medical condition that affected his spine. Now, remember those thieves I mentioned before? They are probably the reason why Ramses II ended up in a plain coffin in a secret collection of royal mummies at Deir al-Bahari, which was rediscovered in 1881. Thankfully, archaeologists were able to identify him because his journeys had been recorded on his wrappings. The process was really tedious too. In fact, in ancient Egypt, the mummification process could take a staggering 70 days to complete. a special person would say a very specific speech while delicately handling the body and drying it out using a type of salt called natron. They also used linen and resin to make the body look more lifelike and to wrap it in cloth. The tomb was equally as important for ancient Egyptians. The walls of King Tut's tomb, for example, were adorned with intricate artwork that depicted his journey to the afterlife, from his burial procession to his passage through the underworld. The ancient Egyptians believed that everyone made this journey after passing away, and they filled their tombs with items and paintings to help the person in their spiritual travels. Additionally, the walls of the tomb were decorated with spells from a special book, which contained a collection of poems that the Egyptians believed would help people reach the afterlife. And speaking of how important this journey was, people also placed food in these ancient tombs. In King Tut's tomb, archaeologists discovered 36 jars of vintage beverages and 8 baskets of fruit, which were believed to be left there to help him in his journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that traveling to the afterlife took a really long time, so they left a lot of supplies, such as food and water, to sustain their loved ones. Pharaohs also generally had numerous luxurious garments and beautiful jewelry in their tombs to ensure that they would have a fashionable journey. These items included various types of linen clothing, such as tunics, scarves, gloves, and headdresses, as well as a lot of gold jewelry with precious stones, like bracelets, buckles, pendants, necklaces, rings, and even precious depictions of insects for protection. Some were also deposited with fans made from ivory and ostrich feathers to keep them cool in the afterlife. Some ancient rulers were even placed in their forever apartments along with boats. For example, Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid at Giza as his tomb, and a large ship was found inside. King Tut, however, was buried with multiple boat paddles, but no actual boat. Instead, he had 3 chariots and numerous walking sticks made of precious materials, perhaps indicating he'd rather travel to the beyond by land, not by water. Amongst the most interesting objects found near ancient mummies are bottles of oils and perfumes. If rulers were supposed to be fashionable, why not smell nice too, right? Also, some of them had some ancient kinds of board games, most of them made out of precious materials like gold or ivory. One of those games was called Senet. It was very popular amongst the ancient Egyptians and very similar to modern-day chess. The ancient Egyptians may have the most famous mummies out there, but they weren't the first to invent the procedure. In fact, it all started in South America with an ancient civilization named the Chinchorro. As far as we know today, these people were the first to mummify their loved ones that had passed away. They did it somewhere around 2,000 years before the Egyptians started their own rituals. Sure, we can tell a lot about ancient rulers by studying these mummies, but until recently, we had no idea what they really looked like during their lifetime. Not so long ago, though, some very special mummy paintings were found by archaeologists studying ancient Egyptian objects. These mummy portraits are highly detailed paintings of individuals that were made while they were still alive. Such paintings were often painted on wood, as opposed to the classical portraits we all know about, which are painted on canvas. They are known for their realism and beauty, and have even been used by researchers to diagnose diseases by comparing them to the corresponding mummies. Some of these portraits also include depictions of jewelry, which was later found on the mummies. The recent discovery of these mummy portraits in Central Egypt is significant, as it marks the first time in over a century that such paintings have been found. Mummies appeared all around the world naturally, too. Mummification can occur without people intervening because of natural conditions, like extremely cold or hot environments, places with a lack of oxygen, or accidental exposure to chemicals that preserve the body. These conditions don't allow bacteria to grow, resulting in the body remaining more or less intact. Famous Otzi was one of these mummies. We know today he was a man who lived around 5,000 years ago in Europe. But upon his discovery in the Alps in 1991, Austrian authorities initially believed that he was a modern mountaineer because of how well preserved the body was. However, after the Iceman was removed from the glacier, it was determined that he was actually from the Copper Age.
Have you heard of Göbekli Tepe? It's an ancient site in Turkey that literally made historians rewrite history books. Over 11,000 years ago, a group of prehistoric humans crafted an enigmatic masterpiece that's even older than Stonehenge. Before its discovery, archaeologists believed that people didn't know about iron and weren't good at making pottery. They were sure that settled life only emerged with the need for agriculture. But Göbekli Tepe changed this belief. The place has revealed that it was the temple that paved the way for a settled life, not agriculture. Until this discovery, researchers believed that farming was the catalyst for sedentary living. Meet Professor Schmidt, the guy whose findings changed this theory. He managed to prove that hunter-gatherer communities laid the very foundations of this way of life. Back in the 1960s, other archaeologists visited the area, but they totally missed the mark. While surveying the region, they stumbled upon a hill with scattered limestone slabs and concluded it was just an old burial ground from medieval times. Little did they know that there was so much more to uncover. In 1994, Schmidt embarked on his own survey of prehistoric sites in the area. Surprise! He instantly realized he had discovered something truly extraordinary. Unlike the nearby flat and barren plateaus, Göbekli Tepe had a gently rounded top, rising 50 feet above the surrounding landscape. Funny enough, the translation of this place's name is Potbelly Hill. Schmidt was sure only humans could have made something like this. Those broken limestone pieces that were mistaken for gravestones turned out to be way more exciting. It was like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. The pieces took on a whole new meaning, and Schmidt with his team was about to dive into the secrets waiting beneath the surface. To their surprise, they found no traces of a settlement. No hearths for cooking, no houses, and none of those adorable clay figurines commonly found in nearby sites of similar age. However, they uncovered that those ancient people used tools like stone hammers. So, Schmidt and his team put their heads together and took a wild guess at the age of Göbekli Tepe's stone structures. Their estimation got backed up by some limited carbon dating done right at the site. The ancient vibes of this place were finally starting to make sense. It was like a puzzle slowly coming together. You may think that back then, people didn't have special tools to create something as cool as Göbekli Tepe. Not true. Turns out, these prehistoric folks used flint tools instead of fancy metal chisels. They were also skilled at chipping away softer limestone and crafting pillars right on the spot. Afterward, they carried the pillars a short distance to the summit and placed them upright. Once the stone rings were complete, they covered them with layers of dirt. Over time, they added new rings, and voila! You've got a cool hill to impress people in the future. During their first year of excavation, the team went through 15,000 pieces of animal bones from wild creatures. These people didn't have pet animals or grow their own food. They hunted wild animals for their meals. But things were about to change, because the place had everything they needed to start farming. Scientists say they had wild sheep and wild grains that could be domesticated. And guess what? Just 20 miles away, geneticists found evidence of the world's oldest domesticated strains of wheat at a prehistoric village. These amazing findings have completely changed how we view civilization. In the past, experts believed that people needed to learn how to farm and settle in one place before they could build temples and develop complex societies. But guess what? Schmidt's research flips that idea on its head. He claims that the incredible effort put into constructing these astonishing structures actually set the stage for the development of advanced societies. It means that societal and cultural changes happened before agriculture. Schmidt has this fascinating hypothesis about Göbekli Tepe. He thinks it could have been a special burial site where people left their loved ones. And here's the twist. The burial site was adorned with fancy statues and symbols representing deities from the spiritual realm. The idea that Göbekli Tepe could have served as a sacred place adds another layer of complexity to the whole story. While the site's true purpose may remain elusive, Schmidt's insights invite us to consider the profound interplay between life and the afterlife, and the deep reverence ancient hunter-gatherer societies may have had for their departed ancestors. Now let's talk about the stars of the show, the mesmerizing T-shaped columns that dominate Göbekli Tepe. These mysterious structures range from 10 to 20 feet tall and most likely represent stylized human figures. But one figure stands out from the rest, the three-dimensional lion relief. This depiction really fires up our imagination. Why? Because it hints at the possibility that lions roamed Anatolia during the Neolithic period. These standing stones are arranged in circles and placed in rectangular pits. Each circle has a similar setup. Two big T-shaped pillars in the center, surrounded by slightly smaller ones facing inward. Talk about a stylish arrangement. These towering pillars reach a whopping 16 feet and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some pillars are plain and simple, while others are like works of art with intricate carvings. Foxes, scorpions, and vultures come to life, crawling and twisting on the pillars' sides. But it's not just animals depicted on these stones. Some pillars have abstract shapes representing humans, and even small carvings of clothing items. Some of them even have belts. Now, there's one pillar that stands out from the rest like a rock star. This super old stone pillar suggests that a comet crashed into Earth. It happened during a chilly period that lasted about 1,000 years. Previous studies examining Greenland ice cores hinted at this comet theory, but now the carvings at Göbekli Tepe prove it right. The carvings on the pillars are like a historical comic strip. They even show a headless human figure. Researchers fed the images into a computer and discovered their connections to constellations, indicating that this temple might have been an ancient observatory. It's like our ancestors were trying to document this cataclysmic event in their own unique way. Archaeologists have been excavating and researching Göbekli Tepe since the mid-1990s, peeling back layers of history and providing us with a deeper understanding of the intricate relationship between various elements. They have no plans to stop the whole process for another 150 years. Who knows what else they'll find? You see, Göbekli Tepe has been labeled purely as a ritual site with no signs of domestic activities. We were led to believe that the absence of water meant it couldn't support semi-sedentary communities. But scientists believe it's time to shake things up and approach Göbekli Tepe with fresh eyes. It's time to question what we believed before and use new evidence and different ways of thinking. Like, there might have been a group of people living in the area who didn't stay in one place all the time. They moved around a bit but still had their own civilization, living in the area semi-sedentarily. Göbekli Tepe is not just home to a single temple, but an astounding collection of over 20 ancient structures. As archaeologists delve into the depths of this wonder, they are unraveling its unique layout, featuring two prominent focal points at the heart of each establishment, complemented by smaller structures and dividing walls. What's even crazier is that in this area, there are over 200 obelisks, which are narrow tapering monuments.
If someone finally invents time travel and you hop on a trip to the past, you won't recognize many of the things you know and love today. The Statue of Liberty and the Egyptian pyramids, some basic gadgets like the remote control and your laptop, and even the corn you have for lunch have all changed beyond recognition. When the pyramids were originally built in ancient Egypt and Giza, and other places, they didn't look sandy brown at all. All of them were covered with white limestone. If you had seen them under the hot African sun, you'd have to look away. That's how smooth and shiny they were. Builders used around 6 million tons of this material for the Great Pyramid of Giza alone. It's the largest one you can still see on your trip to Egypt. The local rules were quite a thrifty crowd, and they reused some of the casing stones for other construction projects. A massive earthquake in the 14th century has also loosened some of the stones, so you won't see a lot of limestone, but some of it is still there, on top of the pyramid of Khafre in Giza. It looks like it has a second peak on top of the first. In ancient times, all pyramids used to have capstones called pyramidions, covered in a mix of gold and silver. Most of them have been lost over the centuries, but you can still see a few of them at museums. They show images of Egyptian deities. The pyramids were probably modeled after a sacred pointed stone, the benben. It represented the rays of the sun. Now, lifting heavy rocks wasn't so simple without the tech we have today. I guess you'll agree with me if you helped your friends move at least once, and they made you carry the couch. But those smart Egyptians of the past thought of that and chose the pyramid shape. It lets the weight distribute evenly throughout the whole thing. The Statue of Liberty has also had a major makeover since it was first unveiled in 1886. Believe it or not, it used to be a shiny brown color, just like a penny. 20 years later, it changed its color to green. It wasn't a fashion statement, but a chemical reaction. The statue is covered with hundreds of thin copper sheets. When copper reacts with air, it naturally forms a protective layer called verdigris. This layer protects what's under it from corrosion, and that's why statues and other things made of copper, brass, and bronze can last so long. When Lady Liberty first turned green, people in authority decided it would be a good idea to paint it all over. It was way before social media, so you couldn't just drop an angry comment under the post describing the idea. But they wrote about it in the local newspapers, and the public didn't love the idea. Then the Times interviewed a copper and bronze manufacturer, and he confirmed they shouldn't repaint it, because removing the protective layer would mean destroying the statue. Over the years, people have suggested painting Lady Liberty several times, but no one has ever done it. I don't know about you, but I can't imagine that lady in any other color, so I guess it's for the better. You love bananas as much as I do? Next time you enjoy a juicy soft one, remember you gotta thank selective breeding for that texture. The original wild bananas had many large, hard seeds and not so much delicious pulp. And hey, who doesn't like a sugary watermelon? It has a history of over 5,000 years, and it used to have bitter yellowish white flesh and was really tricky to open. Selective breeding saved the day again, and watermelons got way sweeter. Japanese scientists went further and invented the seedless version. Corn's grandmother is a Mexican grass called teosinte. The kernels in this grass were small and hard to get. Farmers from many thousands of years ago saved the seeds only of those plants that were larger or tastier, or with kernels that were easier to grind. Thanks, my friends, for giving us the corn that's edible and even delicious. And just imagine, wild avocados were so small that they could easily fit in the palm of your hand. The pit in them was so large you wouldn't find much edible material inside. They also had a much harder shell than the ones we're used to. You probably wouldn't get a lot of work done without your beloved computer today, but I can't tell you exactly whom to thank for this invention. The ABC from 1942 is one of the contendants for the title of the first computer. It's short for the Atanasoff Berry computer, named after its inventors at Iowa State University. The ABC weighed over 700 pounds. Yep, yours must be way lighter than that. That big boy consisted of around 300 vacuum tubes and had a rotating drum, a little bigger than a paint can, and had small capacitors on it. A capacitor is a gadget that can store an electric charge, like a battery. The ABC could solve problems with up to 29 different variables to help scientists save some time. Like modern computers, it used binary digits, ones and zeros, to represent all numbers and data. Because of that, it was possible to do the calculations electronically. And now, my favorite part, The ABC finished one operation about every 15 seconds. Just for you to compare, it's millions of operations per second now. Unlike the tech we use today, the ABC did not have a changeable stored program, so the program could only do a single task at a time. An operator had to write down the intermediate answer and then dial that back into the computer. Sounds like another reason to be happy we live in the 21st century. That remote control you use for all sorts of appliances has gone a long way too. Nikola Tesla, who gave us alternating current, designed one of the first wireless remote controls back in 1898. He named his invention teleautomation and demonstrated it on a miniature boat controlled by radio waves. The boat had a little metal antenna attached to it. Tesla sent signals to the boat using a box with a lever and a telegraph key, which was his version of a remote control. Those signals set electrical contacts on the boat into motion and moved the rudder and the propeller, and Tesla was controlling the boat. The concept of the remote control soon spread to other gadgets. The first television remote control followed in 1950. It was designed by the Zenith Radio Corporation called LazyBone. Don't take it personally, please. This LazyBone had a massive cable that was attached to the TV set, and those who tried it didn't fall in love with the invention because they tripped over that cord. I feel your pain, my friends. If you live or work on one of the top floors, you gotta love this one. Meet the first passenger elevator. It traveled at the speed of 40 feet per minute. Not the fastest, I know, compared to today's record, which is 40 feet per second. But hey, it was built back in 1857 in New York and was more of a tourist attraction than a necessity. The elevator had a steam engine hidden in the basement of a 5-story building. 3 years later, they shut it down because the public didn't appreciate it. Otis Tufts filed the first patent for a vertical railway around the same time. His invention included an actual car with a bench inside for people to sit on. Sounds like a great spot to hang out with friends to me. What do you say? Then they started adding elevators to luxurious hotels around the world. They were entire rooms with a rich design, upholstered seats and mirrors on the walls, and sometimes even a small chandelier. There was an obligatory operator who'd close the door and the car would start its super slow ascent. It was still more about style than about speed, so I guess I'd choose the stairs.
You're walking down the street. You see a strange-looking antique shop called Ageless Trinkets of Mr. Bright. You're curious, so you enter there. You take a look at all the weird stuff. Suddenly, an old folded parchment paper catches your attention. It's a world map, but something's off with it. Instead of showing the countries as you know them, it shows the locations of 4 mythical lost worlds and civilizations. Mr. Bright, the shop owner, comes next to you after realizing your shock. This map won't let you find these places or anything, but I can explain to you the legends behind them if you want, he says. Let me begin with Atlantis. You might know it as Aquaman's underwater kingdom, but Atlantis, the fictional island, was actually first introduced in 2 of Plato's works. According to him, Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization that existed about 9,000 years before his own time, and its story had been passed down by poets, authors, and others. He wrote about Atlantis and its citizens to give a moral lesson and to teach about the dangers of arrogance, as well as the eventual downfall of those who are after too much power. In his dialogues, Plato stated that Atlantis was a great and powerful empire that was respected in all parts of the world. It was founded by beings who were half deities and half human, and became a great naval power after a while. Being an island filled with gold, silver, and other precious metals certainly helped their case. But besides that, it was also known for its breathtaking architecture and state-of-the-art technology, as well as its countless rare and exotic wild animals. Atlanteans were proud of their great achievements and the perfection of their civilization. But their excessive pride was going to bring their downfall. They believed they were so superior that they could gain control over any nation. This led them to launch a series of invasions. They conquered many of the Mediterranean lands, but when it was time to enter Athens, Athenians pushed back with an extraordinary force, so the Atlanteans were finally defeated. Plato stated that deities then got angry at Atlanteans because of how wicked, greedy, and immoral they became. So they punished them by sending earthquakes, which caused Atlantis to sink beneath the sea. Although the earliest written records of Atlantis were Plato's works, some people still believed his story to be based on truth and tried to identify the island of Atlantis with actual countries. Some people suggested it may have been located in the Mediterranean Sea, near the coast of Spain or Italy. Others thought it may have been located in the Caribbean, off the coast of Central or South America, but there was no solid evidence to support any of these claims. One theory, in particular, seemed more plausible than the others, though. Located in the Aegean Sea, the island of Santorini was the home of a highly advanced Minoan society. However, due to a huge volcanic eruption, it was destroyed about 3,600 years ago, causing the Minoan civilization to suddenly disappear. These similarities between the fictional Atlanteans and the historical Minoans made Santorini a good candidate for the speculations. Yet again, there were still major flaws with it, such as how the time when Plato said Atlantis was destroyed doesn't coincide with the time of Santorini's eruption. So Atlantis still continues to be regarded as nothing more than a popular legend in the scientific world. Now, let's move toward the northeast direction on the map, Mr. Bright says. According to Celtic Breton mythology, there once was a magnificent city called Ys, also known as Caris, that towered over Douarnenez Bay in France's Brittany region. It was the most wealthy city in the entire Atlantic. It was especially famous for its beautiful gardens and buildings, and its citizens were all living comfortably and happily there. Dahut, who was King Bradlon's daughter in Breton legends and literature, had a deep love for the sea. She begged her father to build a city at the edge of the sea, and that is how the city of Ys was established. Little did she know that she would be the one responsible for the destruction of her father's beloved gift. You see, since the city was surrounded by the sea, it needed to be protected by a dike equipped with floodgates, and these gates could only be opened at low tide. And the only one who had the keys to these gates was the king himself. One day, a handsome red knight arrived at the city, but couldn't pass the gates. Dahut was so taken by him that she wanted to let him in. She knew that her father was the keeper of the only key to the city, so she sneaked into his room and stole it from him. Then she gave it to the Red Knight so that he could enter the city and they could be together. However, the Red Knight turned out to be the Prince of Darkness, and he intentionally left the gate open to the raging sea. The waves soon swallowed all of Ys. King Gradlon was able to escape on his magical horse, but Dahut couldn't. She turned into an evil mermaid who lured sailors into the sea. Today, if you go to Quimper, a city in Brittany, northwest France, you can find the statue of King Gradlon riding on his horse. Although the city of Ys is a legend, Brittany coast locals believe that on the days when the waters are calm, you can still hear the tolls of the city bells deep under the sea, if you listen carefully. Mr. Bright then points at the Indian Ocean on the map and says, "Now, have you heard about Lemuria?" Back in the mid-1800s, a few scientists suggested that there was once a continent that existed in the Indian Ocean, somewhere close to the south of modern-day Sri Lanka. The first one to popularize this theory was the British lawyer and zoologist Philip Lutley Sclater. In his paper, The Mammals of Madagascar, he stated that he found lemur fossils in India, and not in Africa. However, this discovery was extremely shocking to him because of the fact that lemurs' original homeland, Madagascar, is much closer to Africa. He proposed that this was possible only if some larger continent connected the two once. He stated that this continent must have eventually sunk to the ocean floor. He then named it Lemuria, and hence the theory was born. People who came after Sclater took his theory a step further and thought that Lemuria was also the home of an extinct race of humans called Lemurians, who had 4 arms and enormous bodies, and were also the ancestors of modern-day humans, as well as lemurs. Of course, as new scientific discoveries were made on plate tectonics, evolution, and the study of DNA, the theories regarding the fictional continent called Lemuria were debunked. The last fictional land on the map is Agartha, Mr. Bright says. Taking its roots from Eastern mysticism, one legend says there's a kingdom called Agartha that is located deep beneath the surface of the earth. It's where all 4 corners of the world are connected by paths and tunnels. It is said that there's a secret entrance into Agartha hidden in the Gobi Desert, and it's built by Agarthans themselves using advanced technology that can't be detected by us, the surface folks. According to some beliefs, Agartha exists to counterbalance the energies of those who live above the surface. While we live in a state of rush and heightened emotions, this world beneath us is the total opposite. Some even say that those who escaped Atlantis fled here to continue their lives inside the Earth's core. And yet, others think it's actually a land that's crawling with all kinds of monsters. But there's no need to be scared, since modern science proved Earth's core is not actually hollow and is a solid hot iron ball. So you can cancel your journey plans to the center of the Earth if you've made any. Thanks, Mr. Bright.
No matter what happens, don't stop! We almost got it! 2 treasure seekers are digging frozen ground in a cornfield at night. It's raining hard, lightning is flashing, but these 2 guys keep working. And now the shovel hits something solid. No way! A treasure chest! They start digging faster and find a piece of a ship's engine. What the? Far from the seas and lakes, somewhere under the fields of Kansas City, they found a giant sunken ship. How is this possible? Now you'll see. Some people spend their lives searching for shipwrecks with treasures underground. One of them is explorer David Hawley. He's been looking for such ships far from the seas, rivers, and oceans for many years. He does this because he likes the feeling of adventure. The holds of these ships may contain chests of gold, antiques, and artifacts, and you can get a lot of money for them. David says you don't have to go into the ocean to find a sunken ship. They may be lying in your backyard. But why do ships end up buried underground among fields, farms, and plains? Let's find out using the example of steamboat Great White Arabia. According to old records, the newspaper clippings, this ship had been carrying about 200 tons of treasure before it sank in 1856. Many rumors and local legends said the ship was lying underground a few miles northeast of Kansas City. It was there because people deliberately altered the riverbed and channels of the Missouri River in the second half of the 19th century. They artificially brought the shores closer to each other. They narrowed the river to increase the flow's speed, so boats could sail much faster. In the 19th century, steamboats were the most popular means of transporting passengers and goods. Before railroads, they extended the western border across the Mississippi and Missouri rivers and brought supplies to people. That's why it was so important to increase the speed of their movement. So, on September 5, 1856, Arabia was sailing along such an estuary. It came across a snag sticking out of the water. A piece of log quickly flooded the ship. Fortunately, all passengers were evacuated. But the steamer and its precious cargo reached the silt bottom of the Missouri River in a few minutes. Several years had passed. Everyone forgot about the vessel. During this time, the course of the Missouri River had changed. But Arabia remained under the wet, muddy bottom. The soil level above it was getting higher, and the ground was losing moisture. Eventually, many decades later, a cornfield formed above the sunken ship. In the 1980s, one farmer owned this area, and he had no idea what was hidden in his territory. David Hawley carefully studied the history of the sunken ships of the USA. He knew that hundreds of steamers had gone underwater all over Missouri, but most of all, he was interested in Arabia, as there were rumors that it was filled with gold and other valuable things. The territory of cornfields in Kansas was vast, but David Hawley knew how to search properly. In 1987, he started working. First, together with his brother and father, they collected all the clippings from old newspapers they could find. They were looking not only for information about the steamer, but also for maps of the Missouri River. They tracked its historical changes, checked the dates, and identified a large area where the steamer sank. Next, they used electromagnetic testing and other geological stuff to study the soil and find the right place. They searched for differences in ground moisture and density. Then, they went through the territory with powerful metal detectors. And so, by the fall of 1988, they had determined the location of the steamer. Arabia was the size of a football field. This gigantic vessel lay 45 feet underground, 4 stories down. But before they started excavating, they had to ask the owner of the cornfield for permission. For the farmer, this news was a big surprise. He agreed, on the condition that the excavations would be completed by spring so that he could sow a new crop. Digging a giant ship in winter is much more difficult and expensive than at other times. It includes additional equipment, electricity, and heating costs. The team worked day and night. They financed the excavations out of their own pocket. Each invested more than $10,000 and took out a bank loan. Finally, they noticed the first details of the ship. The shovels hit the huge engine boilers and the deck. The goal had been achieved. Most of the cargo lying inside the sunken ships is covered with rust, shells, mud, and is badly damaged. The contents of Arabia were in excellent condition, considering that the ship had sunk 130 years prior. Unfortunately, they didn't find the chests of gold. Still, they got several tons of other valuable cargo, household items of people who lived in the middle of the 19th century. It was a time capsule. The ship was carrying supplies for hundreds and thousands of people, and all these things were perfectly preserved. For example, they could clearly see the brand stamp Goodyear Rubber Company on one rubber shoe. The longer the excavations continued, the more things David and his team found. In the barrels, they found plates from the 19th century. They were intact and usable. Also, there were clean clothes, thousands of pairs of shoes, harpoons, frying pans, and umbrellas. The ship was carrying cargo to supply about 16 small towns. Yes, it's not gold, but such artifacts are also precious. The contents of the ship could be worth millions. However, the crew wasn't going to sell these things. They made a museum on the site of a former fruit market in Kansas City. If you go there, you will immediately feel like you're in a department store of the 19th century. There are thousands of items in good condition. Even the matches here are dry enough to light up. It took David many years to present the entire collection from the steamship. He values each of the items and doesn't want to sell them. Anyone can come here, pay for a ticket, and find themselves in the past. Who knows, maybe there's an old ship hidden in your backyard too. Geologists found an older vessel in the hot desert of Namibia in 2008. This ship sailed back in the days when pirates scared sailors on the seas, and now it's inside a dried-up lagoon. The ship sailed from Lisbon in 1533 and disappeared with the crew near a small diamond mining town. After almost 500 years, the hull had been badly damaged. Only the carcass of the ship remained, but the treasure hidden inside the vessel stayed intact. They carefully studied the boat for a long time, trying not to ruin anything. And then, 5 days later, they found a big old chest in the hold. Carefully opening it, they found gold coins there. Thus, the cost of the ship was estimated at about $10 million. The exact cause of the shipwreck is unknown, but experts believe the ship was destroyed by heavy cargo and bad weather. It went to the bottom of a lagoon that later became a desert. Some find an airplane in their backyard, others discover a ship, and one man found a passage to an ancient secret city in his house. This happened in Turkey in 1963. the owners of the building decided to make repairs. He went to his basement and knocked down the wall to turn this place into a living room. And so, behind one wall, he found a tunnel leading underground. The man thought it was some kind of a secret chamber. He went down there and realized it was something much more than that. It was an ancient city 18 floors deep. People built it in the years 780 to 1180 as a refuge from weather disasters and the invasion of enemies. This place also includes many underground tunnels that stretch for several miles in different directions. People could get to the town from different points using secret passages leading to these roads. The city can accommodate about 20,000 residents, livestock, and tons of food supplies. Archaeologists have also found a chapel, schools, stables, and public kitchens there. We've all been afraid of the dark at some point in our lives, haven't we? I mean, do you remember getting tucked into bed by your mom or dad after they read you some scary fairy tale with monsters and dragons, or even dinosaurs? But just as your parents were about to turn the lights off and silently step out of your room, you remembered. What if there was something hiding under your bed? Or worse, what if some spooky creature was stuck somewhere in the closet? You could probably get up and check, but it was too dark out there. Wouldn't it be great to have some source of light that would come from within your body? You could always use it whenever you get surrounded by darkness. Unfortunately, as humans, we aren't able to do that. But there are a bunch of creatures out there that can, in fact, light themselves up. That's thanks to a little something scientists call bioluminescence. Animals and fish living in the ocean tend to have this talent more often than others. And you can find these creatures anywhere, close to the surface or deep down at the bottom. 2.5 miles deep if you have a knack for numbers. These creatures use their light for a lot of things, like communicating with other members of their species, luring in prey, and even scaring away enemies. Bioluminescence is basically an organism's ability to emit its own light. Chemistry has a lot to do with it. Such animals use two chemicals, one called luciferin and the other called luciferase. Add a bit of oxygen and bam! Light! Should you ever wonder if you actually observe bioluminescence or if someone just dropped a glow stick in the ocean, be on the lookout for neon blue, green, or even red sparkles in the sea. They're usually spread over a large area. This can even make the water look like glitter or a starry sky. You can thank squid, tiny crustaceans, and algae for this romantic atmosphere. Now, I've got another unusual phenomenon for you. How about a golden waterfall? I'm not kidding, it actually exists, and it's a natural phenomenon. To see it, you have to drive to Yosemite National Park to the Horsetail Fall. Make sure to plan your trip in winter or early spring. That's the only time during the year when you can see this awesome phenomenon. It doesn't need any scientific explanation. It's nothing more than sunlight at dusk hitting the waterfall in such a unique way that it makes it look like a river of lava. Or gold, your choice. That's the reason why during this time of year, the Horsetail Fall is also named the Fire Fall. Unfortunately, this phenomenon is becoming less and less visible within the years, mostly because of drought and other issues connecting with the melting of snow. So, should you ever decide to visit, keep an eye on the waterfall since the effect is very brief. Ever heard of a dirty thunderstorm? It's also called volcanic lightning. Apparently, specialists looking into the phenomenon have yet to fully grasp what it is. When a regular thunderstorm happens, particles with positive and negative charges collide, hence the giant spark we call lightning. It also makes a lot of noise, which you can recognize as thunder. But when a volcano is erupting, some of the volcanic ash particles get electrically charged, and while getting projected into the air with a huge force, they collide and cause electrical discharges. This whole process makes it look like there's lightning coming from the volcano itself. Imagine all that ash, gas, and smoke coming from the crater, and then add some electricity to the mix. It'll make the whole picture look really bizarre. No wonder this phenomenon is called the dirty thunderstorm. Now, how about clouds that look like waves?
Those are called asperitas clouds, and they're actually quite close to the ground, unlike your regular day-to-day clouds. The name comes from the word aspero, which in Latin translates to rough or uneven. On rare occasion, you may spot such clouds when the weather is calm, but they're mostly associated with thunderstorms. These clouds appear during unstable atmospheric conditions, and surprisingly, they don't produce rain. Even though they do resemble dark storm-like clouds, they also create random patterns, tricking your eyes into thinking you're looking at the surface of the sea from under the water. Another impressive kind of cloud is called mammatus clouds. What makes them so special is a series of bulges emerging from the base of each cloud. One such cloud enters a level in the atmosphere where the wind direction changes. You can see these wave-like patterns in the sky. Australia is the place for you if you like surfing, but not all the waves you can catch there are made of water. Near a town called Hayden, there's a mysterious wave made out of rocks. This granite formation supposedly dates back to 2.63 billion years ago. That's way before dinosaurs started hanging around the planet. Standing at 49 feet high and 360 feet long, the wave was formed as a result of two processes: weathering and erosion. There's softer sediment at the base of the wave rock, which was chemically weathered by groundwater. Winds and rain did the rest of the job, causing the erosion of the rest of the formation. Its red, yellow, and gray stripes are made of iron hydroxide, carbonates, and other chemical compounds that were washed down by the rain. You've made it to Australia, so stick around a bit more. There's one more location here that seems unreal. You'll need to fly over this one, however, if you want the best picture. In the western part of the country, surrounded by green woodlands, there's a series of lakes. They're all a staggering shade of bright pink. Out of them all, the most famous is Lake Hillier, a 2,000-foot-long reservoir. It's surrounded by both sand and a forest of eucalyptus trees. This makes the cartoon-like hue of the lake stand out even more. One of the many theories explaining the color of these mysterious lakes is connected with algae. These algae appear to gather high levels of a substance called beta-carotene, which has a red-orange pigment in it. Another explanation involves haloarchaea. Those are microorganisms that sometimes look red. Even if you don't enjoy flying, the lakes are great for taking a swim. They're not toxic, even though they have loads of salt in them. This means you'll be able to stay afloat easily, and the water won't damage your swimsuit. During winter up north in Canada, a bizarre phenomenon happens at Lake Abraham in Alberta. Underneath the frozen surface, you can spot some weird objects that look like frozen jellyfish. It's definitely not the case, as these creepy formations are just frozen methane bubbles. Those are pockets of gas that were trapped underwater and got stuck there after the lake had frozen. They appear when leaves and grass fall into the water and bacteria digest them. This process transforms them into methane. This phenomenon is as beautiful and strange as it is dangerous. The pockets of methane can easily become highly flammable. When the temperatures rise during the spring, the ice melts and these bubbles start popping and fizzing. It's a spectacular sight to observe. Picture a lake filled with soda. Remember not to bring any source of fire. It can be very dangerous for visitors. You can check out these types of lakes all across Canada's Banff National Park. Nature often tends to make its own music. Just listen to the sound of crickets at night or the soothing noise of a waterfall. But in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, there's a strange geological phenomenon which takes nature soundtracks to a completely different level. These are called the ringing rocks, and scientists still can't explain their unusual behavior. If you strike these rocks with a heavy object, like a hammer or another rock, the stones will make a ringing sound, as if they were hollow, but they're not. What makes the ringing rocks even more bizarre, apart from the mysterious sound they make, is that no animal wants to hang around there. Even though the rocks are surrounded by a thick forest,
Scientists haven't managed to trace any animal activity in the area yet. Even more striking is the fact that despite all the trees around the rocks, you won't find any leaves lying on the boulders. What makes these rocks so unappealing for both animals and vegetation is still up for debate.
Question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato all the way back in ancient Greece, the tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learned about in school: Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlo Petri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlo Petri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pavlo Petri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, It looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yanaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yanaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yanaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The triangle pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yanaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay would be the oldest civilization in the world.
Imagine you've booked a tour through the jungles of Costa Rica. All of a sudden, you stumble upon a huge stone sphere, nearly the length of a king-sized bed in diameter. How on earth did it end up there? And what does it symbolize? You immediately ask your guide. He's not as amazed as you are, and tells you that there are actually several hundreds of them scattered across the south of the country. The mysterious stone spheres don't have an official name. The locals simply call them las bolas, which means balls in Spanish, while historians refer to them as dequispheres, after the culture that produced them. Scientists have studied the sediment layers of the Earth around them and estimate that the earliest were made around the year 600 CE, and the newest ones date to the year 1000 CE. Many of the spheres were relocated after their initial discovery, and that's why archaeologists can't date them precisely. The dequis culture completely disappeared shortly after they were discovered by the Spanish in the 16th century. Unlike the Mayas and the Aztecs, the myths or legends of these peoples didn't survive, so they cannot explain the existence of the mysterious orbs. More than 300 of these objects have been discovered so far, with some being smaller than 1 inch in diameter, and the largest measures 6.6 feet in diameter, standing taller than most humans. Although there are ones made from limestone, most spheres were carved out of a coarse version of basalt, a type of rock that forms when lava cools rapidly. Some orbs weigh up to 15 tons, and in most cases, their surface is smooth to the touch, although there are coarse, mostly unfinished pieces. If we throw away the theory that river erosion naturally sculpted the spheres, the ancient people seem to have created them by hammering boulders with other rocks. Once they got the rough shape they were aiming for, they would polish the rock to perfection, using techniques such as controlled fracture and grinding. The mysterious spheres are located in the Dequis Delta, on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Most of them can be found in a place called Farm 6, which, alongside 3 other sites, was proclaimed a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2014. The area contains other finds from the pre-Columbian era, such as paved areas, burial sites, and mounds. For centuries, the stone balls were hidden under a thick layer of sediment that protected them against the elements and looters until they were unearthed during the 1930s. The company that owned the land was clearing the rainforest for banana plantations when they stumbled upon these unusual stone constructions. Some were damaged by bulldozers, and some by workers trying to pry them open, as they believed there was gold hidden inside. It took a while before the authorities intervened to stop further damage to the finds. Doris Stone, the daughter of an executive of the company that owned the land, was the first to study the spheres. In 1943, she published an article in a leading American archaeological journal, turning the world's attention to the orbs. Expeditions soon followed, and archaeologists were immediately able to determine that the stone formations were human-made, probably created by the ancient indigenous population of Costa Rica. To this day, no one has been able to fully explain their function in a scientific way. It means there's still room for some wild theories about the sphere's origins and true purpose. The most popular theory in the scientific community is that the stone spheres served as decorations and status symbols, as many of them were found near the houses of chieftains. Local tribal leaders were also laid to rest with some of the smaller balls, so these stone formations were definitely associated with power in some way. Chiseling a boulder to perfection involved a lot of labor and planning, and only powerful individuals could afford it at the time. The other popular theory is that the boulders were used for astronomical observations. Individual spheres represented stars or planets, like a primitive map of the night sky. Since they were perfectly round, it was easy to roll them around. Before the jungle engulfed them, the area where they were found was a flat alluvial plain, ideal for rolling large boulders around. Another version of this theory suggests that the stones were used as boundary markers, much like modern border stones, which are also mostly made from stone. Finally, legends from other tribes that lived in the area tell of how the spheres were cannonballs that the deity of thunder used to drive away the deity of winds and hurricanes. We still don't know the original purpose of the Costa Rican spheres, but they remain an important part of the country's national identity. The National Museum in the Costa Rican capital, San Jose, has 6 of them in its courtyard. Many other spheres have become prized garden decorations for wealthy Costa Ricans. There's even one at Harvard University. More than a millennium after they were created, the mysterious stone spheres of Costa Rica are still associated with power and wealth. In terms of numbers, the stone orbs are not perfectly round. They are rated as nearly perfect, at 96% spherical in shape. And while even that is pretty impressive, the spheres of Costa Rica are not the only ones of their kind. Nearly a decade ago, workers came across mysterious giant stone spheres deep underground in a coal mine in northern Asia. The surface of the spheres, which measured a little over the length of a human footstep in diameter, was unusually smooth, and people tried to explain it somehow. Some were certain they were out of this world, and others suggested the spheres were actually petrified dinosaur eggs. Scientists quickly put an end to further discussion, as it turned out that the mysterious spheres were concretions. Those are rock formations that take millions of years to form deep underground. Think of a pebble that picks up snow as it rolls down a hill. That's how concretions are made. Groundwater, rich in sediment and minerals, flows around the sediment, slowly shaping it into a perfect orb. The process is quite common in nature, but most concretions are fairly small. The spheres found in the coal mine grew to their size in the mineral-rich ground, and they were big enough to get the press and the general public interested. Another possible case of concretions is the massive stone spheres found in the Visoko Valley in Bosnia. Samir Osmanagic, better known as the Bosnian Indiana Jones, was the first to explore those objects about as wide as the length of a London bus. He believes the stone spheres were carved by a lost civilization that lived in the area 1,000 years ago. The reddish color of the orbs, though, is proof to geologists that they are indeed concretions, rich in iron content. The Moki marbles, found in rural Utah, are similar in color to the Bosnian spheres. These tiny concretions are the size of toy marbles and consist of a sandstone core and a shell made out of hematite, an iron ore. In South Africa, miners have come across Klerksdorp spheres, which are similar in shape and size to Moki marbles. The only difference is that these ones formed inside volcanic sediments and ash. The most intriguing among human-made tiny spheres are probably the orbs found on several Greek islands. Scientists discovered 700 stones smaller than golf balls near the Bronze Age site of Akrotiri on the island of Santorini. They believe that the finds were between 3,600 and 4,500 years old. When they compared all the stones' variations in size and color, the archaeologists concluded that these enigmatic stones could have easily been the oldest board game ever made. With the help of artificial intelligence, scientists are now trying to work out the rules of this game.
Stonehenge wasn't a witchy monument to travel through time. It was actually constructed as a hope to build a different future. Recent research just found out that the monument was probably raised as an attempt to reunite the Britons during a period of big division. The thread of this story lies on the altar stone, the monument's most iconic rock. For years, scientists believed that the stones used in Stonehenge, including the altar stone, came from the nearby Preseli Hills in Wales. In this scenario, Stonehenge would have been built by a local community. That is, Neolithic people who would have found easy-to-access materials to build a ceremonial mound, a sundial calendar, and a final resting place, all in one. Things changed when another discovery was made. In 2018, leading-edge research pointed that the altar stone actually came from the River Tay region in northeastern Scotland, which is located over 400 miles away from Stonehenge. Scientists found similar rocks as such in Scottish monuments. You see, the altar stone is a recumbent stone, laying on its side. Many of the rocks were found in ceremonial stone circles in Scotland, and they are unique to this region. When this discovery broke through, it got archaeologists thinking. Maybe Stonehenge wasn't just a local project, but a wider collaboration between different tribes and communities across Britain. To understand this, we need to rewind to around 3000 BCE. That's when Britain still wasn't a unified country per se. Rather, it was a patchwork of tribes such as those coming from southern or eastern Europe, each with their own customs and beliefs. As an island, Britain's population changed many times. Britain was mainly composed of farmers who descended from people from the Middle East and arrived on the land around 6,000 years ago. This group thrived in the area until 2500 BCE, when another group coming from the regions of the Netherlands and Germany started to appear. These ones, also known as the Beaker people, were responsible for the large population turnover that Britain experienced during the Neolithic period and the years that followed. The Beakers were called so because of a specific type of pottery they used to make and bury their loved ones with after their passing. It's possible that the original dwellers of the land didn't like it that their land was being repopulated. And what researchers suggest is that Stonehenge was this attempt to reunite the original Neolithic farmer population and regain some type of identity control over their land. They would have invested a lot of time and energy in bringing the altar stone all the way down from Scotland, without the help of wheel technology, for example. You see, the wheel had already been invented in Lower Mesopotamia, but since there was no Wi-Fi at the time, the Brits weren't aware of this technology until much later on. This whole territorial crisis could have driven locals to use their resources to move the altar stone to Salisbury Plain in England, in order to reunify the land. You see, Stonehenge wasn't built in one go. Its history dates to around 3000 BCE. That's when the monument was just a circular ditch and bank, known as a henge. Inside, they placed wooden posts and possibly totem-like carvings. This version of Stonehenge wasn't about rocks yet. It was more of a ritualistic place and possibly a final resting place. They found several cremation pits from this period, making it the oldest resting place in all of Britain. It was only around 2600 BCE that the blue stones came around. The naming might be a bit misleading since they're not literally blue rocks. They have a bluish tinge to them when they're freshly broken, hence the name. These smaller rocks probably came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, which is about 150 miles away from Stonehenge. Some researchers say that the ancient ones believed that blue stones had healing qualities. So we can maybe guess why they went through all of the trouble to move them from Wales to Salisbury Plains, huh? A little bit later than that, circa 2500, that's when we start having the Stonehenge we know and love today. That's when the Sarsen stones started to arrive. The Sarsens are Stonehenge's huge stones. I mean, each Sarsen can weigh around 25 tons. That's as much as 3 African elephants stacked together. The Sarsens make that iconic outer ring circle. Supposedly, that's also when the altar stone was moved from Scotland directly to the heart of Stonehenge. The altar stone is the largest of the blue stones used to build Stonehenge. Today, the altar stone lies recumbent at the foot of the largest trilithon of the monument. In case you don't know, the trilithons are the horizontal stones used to form those famous arches we see today. And here's where the story takes a twist. For nearly a century, scientists believed that the altar stone came from the same area as the blue stones, the Preseli Hills in Wales. It made sense back then. If you're already hauling stones from Wales, why not grab a special one to be the so-called altar? Except that theory started crumbling in 2018, when a team of researchers decided to dig deeper. They used advanced geochemical analysis to pinpoint where the altar stone's sandstone actually came from, and it turns out, it wasn't Wales. Instead, the results pointed north. specifically to the Orcadian Basin in northeastern Scotland, 400 miles from Stonehenge. This revelation changed the whole script of Stonehenge's story. How would they move the rocks, you may ask? Well, there's an old theory known as the ice road that suggests that the rocks were moved by natural icy pathways that formed during the winter. This way, they could slide the rocks down all the way to Stonehenge. But hey, if we're talking about a distance of over 100 miles, that's not too realistic. Anyways, this theory was debunked because it was warmer back then than it is today. There's also the river theory that suggests that the rocks were floating along the river from the quarry to the site. But if we're talking about sarsen rocks, they're too heavy to float. So there goes this theory. What we're saying is, no one knows how the rocks were moved. Another interesting info came from all the research done in Stonehenge. A recent laser survey of the stones revealed the different stone working methods used and has shown that some parts of the monument were more carefully finished than others. In particular, the northeast side and the inner faces of the central trilithons were finely dressed. FYI, a trilithon is one of Stonehenge's most famous shapes. It's when two huge monoliths receive a third one on top of them, connecting the two together. This fancy word is just Greek for having three stones. But anyway, the bigger question, and maybe why Stonehenge is so famous, is why it was built in the first place. You see, Stonehenge's entire layout seems to have been carefully planned to align with the movements of the sun. The monument's architecture is particularly attuned to the solstices, the shortest and longest days of the year. During the summer solstice, the sun rises perfectly in line with the heel stone, casting light straight into the heart of the stone circle. A spectacular, almost magical sight that surely wowed its ancient audience. But it's the midwinter solstice that seems to hold a special connection to the altar stone. As the sun sets on that day, its light aligns with the altar stone at the center of Stonehenge. To the builders of Stonehenge, this alignment may have symbolized more than just celestial precision. It likely carried profound ancestral and spiritual significance. The altar stone, illuminated by the setting sun, could have been seen as a bridge between worlds, connecting the living with their ancestors, the earth with the cosmos, and the present with the eternal. In a world without calendars, clocks, or weather apps, the solstices were everything. They marked the rhythm of life, guiding agricultural cycles and spiritual rituals alike. So Stonehenge wasn't just about the stones or the people who built it, but perhaps a way to honor their ancestral roots in an ever-changing world.
So looky here, scientists discovered ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out, his VIP final resting place looks more like a public graveyard with about a dozen wooden coffins that's been there for around 3,600 years. Okay, I might have exaggerated a tad. The 11 tombs weren't exactly right next to King Tut, but they were close, near the same city of Luxor. New findings in Egyptian tombs can help us piece together what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians seem to have been remarkably like us, modern humans. Say, the women have always loved jewelry, and archaeologists retrieved a beautifully made necklace with 30 amethyst beads and 2 agate beads, plus a hippo head amulet. Bet it was all the rage back then. Researchers also discovered 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus, and the other was decorated with Hathor, the ancient Egyptian deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love. These recent excavations near Tutankhamun's burial site led to another jaw-dropping revelation. For the first time in thousands of years, fragments of Queen Hatshepsut's Valley Temple were uncovered. This fearless woman was thought to be the second female pharaoh, who ruled with both courage and wisdom, leaving a legacy as solid as the stones themselves. Her temple, hidden for ages, opens a window into a time filled with power, intrigue, and spiritual devotion. Archaeologists found over 1,000 beautifully decorated stone blocks on the outskirts of Hatshepsut's funerary temple. There were very few women who managed to take the throne in ancient Egypt. Another tomb was found nearby, and it belonged to the overseer of Queen Teti Sheri's palace, whose name was Jehuti Mez. Queen Hatshepsut seems to have even more tombs, aces up her sleeve. These tombs were carved into the rock instead of being built as pyramids, showing a unique ancient perspective on how to protect the soul in the afterlife. Experts managed to retrieve some cool ancient pieces from the site. Toys made of clay, mummy masks, winged scarabs, and some amulets. Sadly, there surely used to be way more artifacts, but over the last centuries, there have been people other than archaeologists to stumble upon this site. It's likely that looters got to these tombs before them and may have taken some valuable items. But they did leave behind some cool stuff for the researchers, like pottery used for offerings of bread and meat, along with archers' bows that connect the tomb's owners to the Egyptian military. Meanwhile, soul protection is way more important than you might think, especially if you're roaming around Luxor looking for ancient secrets. You aren't scared of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't scared, but promise me to take it with a dash of salt, okay? For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in paranormal activity, were convinced that there was an unsettling curse surrounding Tutankhamun's archaeological discoveries. This belief stemmed from the mysterious and untimely demise of several excavators who discovered the tomb in 1922 with no logical explanation for why they passed away. It was just easier to chalk it up to something supernatural and avoid the whole mess. But it turns out it wasn't a curse at all. It was likely the radiation that caused those excavators to perish. Now, you might wonder where the radiation came from. After all, while radioactivity was discovered in the 19th century, ancient Egyptians, despite their impressive pyramids, didn't have any radium lying around to make Tut's tomb glow like crazy. So, what could be the real story? It might have been toxic waste behind it all. Toxic levels of radiation from uranium and hazardous waste have been lurking inside the tomb since it was sealed over 3,000 years ago. The burial chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb reportedly has such high radiation levels that anyone who steps inside could easily end up with a fatal dose of radiation sickness or an incurable condition. By the way, you can have a somewhat similar level of radioactivity if you don't get rid of those moldy dinner leftovers you left to perish in your fridge a month ago. But this radioactivity isn't exclusive to Tutankhamun's tomb. Ancient Egyptian artifacts discovery is rewarding yet dangerous due to unusually high radiation levels in Old Kingdom tombs all over Egypt. Geiger counters have detected radiation at 2 sites near the Giza pyramids, and radon, a radioactive gas, has been found in several underground tombs in Saqqara. Interestingly, experts believe that the builders of these ancient tombs were aware of the toxins, as some eerie warnings were carved into the walls of many tombs. One inscription ominously declared, "They that break this tomb shall meet their end by a malady that no doctor can diagnose." Other ominous phrases like "forbidden," "due to evil spirits," only added to the fear that supernatural curses haunted these ancient sites. Ominous signs have stunned archaeologists since forever, but the fear grew even stronger a century ago with the mysterious passing of Lord Carnarvon, who funded King Tut's excavation in 1922 and reportedly explored the treasure-filled rooms, along with several others who entered the tomb. Arthur Weigall, another British Egyptologist who was present at the tomb's opening and is credited with starting the curse myth, passed away young when he was just in his 50s in 1934. Chances are the condition that made him pass was connected to radiation. In total, 6 out of the 26 people who were there when the tomb was opened met their end within a decade from various causes. Not only X-ray exposure, those reasons include asphyxia, stroke, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Well, isn't this getting a little grim? There was one guy who opened the tomb and somehow managed to avoid the infamous curse, Howard Carter, or so it seemed. Some folks pointed to his survival as proof that the curse wasn't real. After digging up the tomb, Carter published several books on the topic and shifted gears from archaeology to dealing in antiquities for various museums. Despite dodging demise or injury, rumors swirled about how the curse may have impacted him in other ways. One of the big stories linked him to Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn. Some said he was madly in love with her, but she married someone else, so he chose to stay single. Others claimed they had an affair while she was in Egypt, which ended when her father passed away and she left the country for good. However, there wasn't much evidence to support these stories. Evelyn was just 6 when they met, and they remained friends until his last breath. She was even one of the few attendees at his funeral, but denied any romantic involvement, saying they weren't that close. A year after the revolutionary discovery near King Tut's tomb, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter. That same year, Beauchamp toured the tomb with his parents, guided by Carter himself. Carter never married and, aside from those posthumous rumors about Evelyn, had no other romantic connections. While the curse adds an intriguing twist to his life story, his tendency to keep relationships at arm's length was evident long before the tomb was opened. It seemed Carter just wasn't a people person. In 1939, after battling a serious illness, he ultimately succumbed to fate. He was 64, which was a pretty common life expectancy in the UK back then, so no one really thought it was off and linked it to an ancient curse. When he passed, it turned out he had several artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb in his London apartment, which were eventually sent back to Egypt, marking what some viewed as the curse's end. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't had all those ancient souvenirs at his place, he would have lived way longer. But all the other demises might seem off. The curse theory was likely fueled by some strange events during the excavation. Carnarvon got a mosquito bite that became severely infected, and around the time they opened the tomb, Cairo experienced a bizarre power outage and a freak sandstorm. Back in England, the Earl's dog, Susie, managed to escape from Carnarvon's house and began barking frantically at seemingly nothing. At least that's what the staff and family saw. Strangely enough, at the very moment her owner's heart stopped, Susie started howling and fell down without showing any signs of life. Maybe radiation didn't play a crucial role after all, and those were indeed ancient artifacts from King Tut's tomb that made them all perish. Spooky, huh?